Chapter 1323. You're courting death. Black Demon's roar was like a thunderclap exploding in the entire Earth prison. Everyone felt their eardrums swell, and their minds were shaken. The terrifying power seemed to be tearing the sky apart. Along the way, the void within 1,000 miles shattered, turning into fragments that filled the sky. Countless void turbulences ran amok. Boom! Black Demon's eyes were filled with killing intent. The chef who inherited the inheritance and the demoness who bore the monstrous curse had to die. With this move of his, he had to eliminate both of his greatest threats. He wanted to use his power to calm everything down. Roar! His roar shook the sky, and Black Demon's aura surged. At this moment, the aura of the Nine-Revolution Great Sage was displayed to its fullest, as if it could destroy heaven and earth. With one move, it could crush everything. There seemed to be light shooting out of Bu Fong's eyes. His face was calm and expressionless. Looking at Black Demon, who was tearing through the void, he seemed very calm. There was no reverence for the existence of the Great Sage. There was only a hint of mockery at the corner of his mouth. That's right, it was mockery. Black Demon felt that he was not mistaken. This little chef, who looked like an ant, had the corner of his mouth curled up mockery. Even Hades' era and the others, who were watching from afar, thought that Bu Fong must have gone crazy. If he wasn't crazy, why would show a mocking expression when facing the Great Sage? Why did he have to mock the Great Sage? The golden light seemed to burst out from the darkness. It lit up the entire sky. A punch suddenly shot out. Without dodging, it collided with Black Demon's dagger. Black Demon's dagger, which was shrouded in monstrous black, demonic energy, tore through the void, causing the void turbulence to explode. However, Bu Fong's punch met it without hesitation. Boom! A loud explosion rang out. Everyone was dumbstruck. Bu Fong's punch collided with Black Demon's dagger. Rumble! Terrifying fluctuations and brilliance suddenly erupted, enveloping everything. Everyone heard a cracking sound. That crisp sound was like the sound of bones breaking, but also like the sound of iron breaking. Hell Overlord Inglong's eyes widened. Hades' era was also in disbelief. Young Bu Fong. Has he been turned into ashes by Black Devil's punch? After all, Black Demon was the Great Sage of the Nine Revolutions realm. The prestige of the Great Sage was not to be trifled with. What right did the Second Revolution Little Saint have to contend against the Ninth Revolution Great Sage? The explosions were still going on. The next moment, everyone was dumbfounded. A figure flew out from the explosion. With a speed as fast as lightning, he suddenly smashed into the ground in the distance. They plowed deep ditches on the ground, and within the ditches, soil flew everywhere. The entire earth seemed to be on the verge of shattering from this collision. Hula! A gust of wind suddenly whistled past. The light and dust were all blown away. Then, amidst the scattered light, a figure slowly walked out. It was a slender figure with a thin body. His black hair fluttered, and his long robe fluttered. Bu Fong's face was indifferent, cold, and emotionless. He raised his golden arm, slowly walking out. With one punch, he had sent a Ninth Revolution Great Sage flying. Bu Fong didn't show any joy or sorrow. It was as if he had done something very normal. However, Bu Fong's unscathed appearance shocked everyone. They all sucked in a breath of cold air. How could it be? Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Or am I seeing things? It must be fake. A Ninth Revolution Great Sage was sent flying by a Second Revolution Little Saint with one punch? The experts who were watching the battle from afar were all dumbfounded. They didn't know what to say. At this moment, they felt as if a mountain was suddenly pressing down on their hearts. It was so heavy that they couldn't even breathe. It wasn't just them. Prison Overlord Inglong and Hades' era were also dumbfounded. They looked at Black Devil, who was in the ruins, and then at the calm and unscathed Bu Fong. The outcome of this collision was far beyond their expectations. Bu Fong, young man, this is Hades' era's mouth seemed to be stuck. He didn't know what to say, so he just stared at Bu Fong. Inglong's eyes lit up. He knew that Bu Fong was magical, but he didn't expect Bu Fong to be so magical. With a single punch, he had sent a great saint who had unleashed a terrifying attack flying. Was he going to break the norm and wash away everyone's impression of him? Stepping on the ground, Bufong glanced at his golden arm. Even Bufong didn't know how much power it contained. It was a power that was beyond his imagination. Bufong knew about the will of the Great Path, and this power seemed to be above the will of the Great Path. Just by touching it with his mental force, he couldn't help but feel his mind tighten. Was this the so-called divine power? The power of God? Bufong's eyes gradually became sharp. In that case, how strong would the so-called gods be? After a drop of divine power evaporated, it gathered on Bufong's fist, making Bufong's Taotai arm even stronger. It gave Bufong the illusion that he could destroy the world with one punch. Of course, it was just an illusion. One punch had broken Black Devil's attack, breaking his bones and breaking his dagger. At the same time, he had consumed 1/3 of the divine power liquid drop's energy. In other words, after one drop of divine power was crushed and evaporated, it was enough for Bufong to punch 3 times. After 3 punches, the divine power would no longer exist. Impossible. Black Devil crawled up from the ground. The bandage on his face fell and melted, dripping dirty liquid. His scarlet eyes were filled with disbelief and shock. The punch of a mere second revolution, Little Saint had broken his attack, his defense, and the bones of his great sage body. What kind of monster was this? No, this power doesn't belong to you. Black Devil's eyes shrank. He seemed to have thought of something. His scarlet eyes were suddenly filled with fear. Then, his body once again emitted a monstrous aura. Black demon energy gathered above his head, forming a world. It was a pitch-black illusory world. As soon as that world appeared, Black Devil's power skyrocketed. It was Black Devil's little world, which contained his will of the Great Path. The 9 Revolution Great Sage's little world was basically no different from a real little world. The will of the Great Path it contained had also become stronger. You're right, this power doesn't belong to me, Bufong said calmly. The tip of his foot gently tapped the ground. Instantly, the entire ground exploded. Boom! Bufong's figure was like a cannonball, shooting toward Black Devil. Raising his hand, his golden fist bloomed with radiance. Black Devil roared. His body seemed to have turned into a black mist, intending to take it away. However, as soon as he flew up, Bufong's dazzling golden fist smashed down again. Boom! The golden fist suddenly blotted out the sky. It shot out from Bufong's position. Then, it smashed into the black mist. Bang! The black mist exploded. Black Devil's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. His body fell from the sky, smashing into the ground, stirring up dust. Bufong walked slowly. He walked in front of Black Devil. All the onlookers held their breaths, not daring to breathe. This scene, which seemed to be the end of the world, shocked them greatly. The 2 Revolution Little Saint had killed the 9 Revolution Great Sage. This was a heaven-defying act. You can't kill me. A look of fear finally appeared in Black Devil's scarlet eyes. In the face of Bufong's power, which did not belong to this world, Black Devil finally felt despair. He only knew that the demon witch's curse was terrible, but he did not know that this little chef was also so strong. The Sword Demon Patriarch was right to tell him to kill Bufong as soon as possible. He hated that he was too arrogant and did not kill the little chef completely. Now, he wanted to give the little chef a chance to turn the tables. This power was the same as that of that man. Is that man going to return again? Black Devil could not help but tremble. This is the 3rd punch. This punch won't spare you. Bufong raised his fist again. The golden light on it had dimmed a little as he pressed it against Black Devil's head. The bandage on Black Devil's head spilled all over the ground. His body was trembling. You want to kill me, and now you say you want to kill you, so you can't give me a reason not to kill you. Bufong looked at Black Devil and said lightly. Black Devil's pupils constricted. Since you can't give me a reason, you can go to hell, Bufong said, his face expressionless. As soon as he finished speaking, boom, the golden light suddenly shone brightly. A punch bloomed under his fist. The dazzling light illuminated the whole world. Terrible explosive energy surged in an instant. Hades' Era and Yinglong were thrown backward by the force, and they felt as if they were flying toward the celestial vault sect. After a long time, only then did the surging rumble dissipate. Then, when everyone saw the scene, they all sucked in a cold breath. The whole ground caved in, as if a meteorite had crashed into it. A huge pit appeared, and the edge of the pit rolled up. Only Acheron's little store was left, standing alone in the pit. Bufong stood in the center of the pit. The golden light on his fist had already disappeared, leaving only white smoke rising from it. The vermilion robe fluttered in the wind. On the ground, there was a small pit. In the pit, a figure was kneeling. This figure was Black Devil's figure. Black Demon's bandages tore apart inch by inch, revealing his figure underneath. It was a withered body. There was no moisture on his skin, as if it was as dry as bones. Bufong withdrew his fist. His body staggered and fell to the ground. Swish, it turned into a puff of green smoke, dissipating. A 9-revolution great sage, the master of a forbidden land, died just like that. Silence. Lifeless. Unbelievable. All kinds of emotions gathered from all directions. Hades' Era brought Yinglong Prison Overlord down from the sky and landed next to Bufong. Looking at Black Devil, who was left with only a pile of remains on the ground, finally, his face couldn't help but tremble in horror. He had killed a 9-revolution great sage with 3 punches. Were chefs nowadays so irritable and arrogant? The elusive Lord of the Black Temple was killed by a chef just like that. He hadn't been destroyed in the calamity of the epic, and he hadn't fallen in the hands of the peak great sage. He had died under the fist of a 2nd revolution little saint. This was the most humiliating way to die. For a 9-revolution great sage, the death of a master of a forbidden land was naturally shocking. In the sky, under the starry sky, in the boundless starry sky, terrible explosions stirred up waves of energy. Thousands of swords swept around Sword Demon Patriarch, as if they were going to cut heaven and earth. Suddenly, his expression changed, and he looked at the sky in disbelief. His eyes were filled with horror. Black Devil is dead? Sword Demon Patriarch said in disbelief. Lord Go had transformed into a fat dog, his paws blotting out the sun, and his body was surrounded by burning earth prison fire. His dog eyes were also filled with amazement. Black Devil is dead? Who killed him? Lord Go couldn't help but mutter to himself. The ghostly fire in the golden skeleton's eye sockets flickered as it stood on the bone dragon's head. In the same place, great sage Acheron burst out laughing. Ha ha! That disgusting Black Devil is dead. This is retribution. Now that the master of the Black Temple is dead, you, the master of the Cave of the Fallen Gods, are not far from death. Are you afraid? Acheron, great sage, laughed excitedly as he stepped on the torch dragon's head. His laughter made the golden skeleton's face darken. Go! Blood-colored, ghostly fire surged out of his eye sockets in a flash, turning into a huge wall of fire that blotted out the sky. Then, the golden skeleton rushed away from the battlefield with the bone dragon, fleeing at top speed. The death of the Black Devil brought him boundless fear. As the masters of the Forbidden Lands who had lived in the same era as Black Devil, he naturally knew how much power was needed to kill Black Devil. If Black Devil could die, then he, the so-called indestructible skeleton, would probably die as well. So, he had to run. As long as he hid in the Cave of the Fallen Gods, everything would be fine. As great sage Acheron laughed heartily, the golden skeleton of the Cave of the Fallen Gods fled. Sword Demon Patriarch, who was confronting Lord Go, grew unsightly. How could Black Devil be dead? Did that woman from God Vanishing Mountain make a move? Impossible. Even if she made a move, she couldn't have killed Black Devil. He pinched his fingers together, and an endless stream of sword light fell from the sky, turning into a river of stars that swept across heaven and earth. The next moment, over his head, a small world filled with sword energy emerged. A streak of silver sword light shot out from the small world. Stepping on the sword light, he left the battle with Lord Go and fled into the distance in a flash. Black Devil is a good-for-nothing. It's so difficult for him to kill a chef. No wonder he could only survive until this era. Sword Demon Patriarch's face was gloomy, and his mind was deep. Lord Go and Great Sage Acheron did not chase after him. They looked at each other, then rushed out of the battlefield of the stars. They were also very curious about who killed Black Demon. Chapter 13:24. Sword Demon Patriarch fled. The Lord Go didn't use his claws to capture him. It was not easy for a 9-revolution Great Sage to capture an opponent. After all, a 9-revolution Great Sage was already a top expert in this world, and one had to pay a huge price to capture him. If the Lord Go wanted to capture Sword Demon Patriarch, he had a way, but he didn't want to expose his true trump card for a mere Sword Demon Patriarch. Sword Demon Patriarch's departure was because Black Demon was killed. The fall of a 9-revolution Great Sage was no small matter, and it was enough to shock the whole netherworld. Black Demon's identity was very special. He was the lord of a forbidden land from Earth Prison. The fall of a lord of a forbidden land meant the demise of a forbidden land. Even when the patriarchs of the 9 Nether Prison clans swept through the forbidden lands, they only sealed the lords of the forbidden lands and didn't kill them. The main reason was that the price paid to kill the lord of a forbidden land was very high. Even the experts of the 9 Nether Prison clans were reluctant to pay such a price. He watched as Sword Demon Patriarch flew away on his sword. A mocking look came into Lord Go's dog eyes. Then, Lord Go turned his head and looked under the dome. The clouds were rolling, but it made Lord Go's eyes flicker more and more. Who is it? How could someone kill a 9-revolution Great Sage? Great Sage Acheron came over, laughing. It was obviously a great achievement for him to scare away the golden skeleton, so he was very excited. Lord Go glanced at Great Sage Acheron and twitched his mouth when he saw the latter's happy look. "Is that all you've got?" Lord Go said lightly. Great Sage Acheron was displeased. You didn't see Jean Lu's face. He was so scared that he almost peed his pants. "Ha ha! I'm so happy to see him. After so many years, I've finally seen these fellows embarrass themselves." The Great Sage Acheron was overjoyed. Lord Go rolled his eyes. "A skeleton can pee? Why don't you pee for me to see? Let's go back and take a look." The fact that he was able to kill Black Demon means that his methods are definitely not ordinary. I really want to see, who is it that could actually kill Black Demon? The fat on Lord Go's chubby face jiggled. Acheron's little store. Smoke and dust billowed, leaving behind only a huge pit within which rocks tumbled down. Hades Era, Inglong, and the others all looked at Bu Fong strangely. Twisting his neck, Bu Fong exhaled. Then, he glanced at Hades Era and the others before walking toward the restaurant. You stood in front of the restaurant, holding little who was wagging his tail in her arms. After the great battle, the restaurant fell into an endless silence. Rocks tumbled down from the ruins. Hades Era and Inglong walked toward the restaurant. The people around them kept quiet out of fear. They realized that they had really underestimated this restaurant. They had thought that the chefs in this restaurant were just fish on the chopping block. Now, it seemed that they were completely wrong. An expert who could kill the Great Sage was just a fish on the chopping block. If they had to face the Great Sage, they would have been slapped to death. Hades Era and Inglong stepped into the restaurant. In the distance, the other Hell Overlords also flew over. After the battle, they were concerned about the safety of Inglong and Hades Era, so they rushed over. In front of the restaurant, Bu Fong clasped his hands, slowly stepping into the restaurant. You looked at Bu Fong with a strange gaze. "Bu Fong, is there any more of that dish? I still want to eat." You stuck out her tongue, licking her rosy lips as she said to Bu Fong, "Still want to eat?" The 3-cup divine chicken. The dish in the God of Cooking's menu must be delicious. However, he had risked his life to cook this dish. If he hadn't fused the yin and yang spirit C by chance, Bu Fong might have been killed by the system. This was a dish that he had cooked with his life. There's no more. Bufong looked at you, his face expressionless. Yu's face showed a look of regret. F***CK. Outside the restaurant. When Hades Era saw you, he screamed. His scream startled you. And little who was lying comfortably in Yu's arms, was so scared that his hair stood on end. Little who stared at Hades Era unhappily. You little girl, how did your cultivation base increase so much all of a sudden? Hades Era looked at you and sucked in a breath of cold air. As a great sage, he could naturally see the overflowing cultivation base in you. 9 Revolution, Little Saint Realm. How did she reach the 9 Revolution, Little Saint Realm? What happened? Why was this world completely different from the world he knew? First, Bufong killed the great sage with 3 punches. Then you broke through to the 9 Revolution, Little Saint Realm in an instant. These changes were really too exciting. Prison Overlord Long also noticed the changes in you, and his eyes shrank. Although his face was pale, he took a step forward and stood in front of you. Looking at Yu's face, his eyes suddenly shone brightly. The power of the curse in your body seems to be a little strange. Inglong's old voice rang out. Yu and the others also stepped into the restaurant. At first, they looked at Bufong in fear, then their eyes locked on you. Secondly, they were shocked by Yu's skyrocketing cultivation base. 9 Revolution, Little Saint Realm. How did this little girl become stronger than them all of a sudden? This restaurant. How could there be so many strange things? I ate Bufong's food. She felt that it was necessary for her to give them a serious explanation. Therefore, he told them about the 3-cup divine chicken he had cooked and what had happened to it. Although you told them the truth, the others didn't believe her. One dish made your cultivation base skyrocket to the 9 Revolution, Little Saint Realm. Hades Era's eyes widened, as if he couldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. If he can level up like that, what's the point of cultivating? Let's go and eat. Hades Era said in disbelief. Prison Overlord Long and the others also fell silent. That's right. They didn't believe Yu's words either. After all, one dish made the 2nd Revolution, Little Saint Realm 9 Revolution, Little Saint Realm. It was just a fantasy story. Previously, Bufong had brewed a wine that could help the great sage and the little saint break through one realm, which was already unbelievable. A dish that could make people's cultivation base soar. How could it appear? Did Bufong cook it with divine herbs? How sensational would such a dish be? And how many nether crystals would it sell? One could imagine that a cup of wine worth 1 million nether crystals could only help the little saint break through one realm. If such a dish that could make people's cultivation base skyrocket appeared, how expensive would it be? If there really is such a dish. Bufong, young man, don't say anything else. Give me 10 servings first. Hades Era waved his hand and said impatiently. Bufong glanced at Hades Era. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not everyone can eat that dish. Bufong said. That dish is exclusive. It's not for sale. Bufong said. You're being biased. I have plenty of money, Hades Era said unhappily. In response to that, Bufong chose to ignore it. He didn't even bother to answer. Rumble. In the sky. 2 figures tore through the sky and appeared, hovering in midair. Lord Dog's body was surrounded by earth prison flame, which could destroy everything, burning and surging. Yellow Spring Great Sage was at his side. Both of them looked down at the ground, gasping when they saw a huge crater in the ground. The Black Fiend really lives up to his reputation as a madman. There are many great sages who choose to fight in the celestial battlefield, but that madman chose to fight on land. Judging from the shockwaves, this entire area is going to be destroyed. Great Sage Acheron said as he looked at the huge crater. The air is filled with boiling energy. There's black demons remnant will of the great path, and also a strange energy, Lord Dog said as he twitched his nose. His eyes shone brightly. He smelled an unusual energy. That energy made Lord Go's heart palpitate. The shockwaves of the battle were caused by a single strike. This means that Black Demon was killed in an instant. Lord Dog's fat body trembled as he walked in the void, his voice indifferent. Great Sage Acheron took a deep breath. How could it be? Black Demon was killed in an instant? Who could do that? However, this time, Lord Go didn't answer him. Instead, he floated into Acheron's little store. They saw Acheron's little store. My wine! Great Sage Acheron was excited when he saw Acheron's little store. He dashed into the restaurant. As soon as they entered the restaurant, they felt something unusual. However, the atmosphere was extremely harmonious. Bufong was behind the counter, wiping a porcelain bowl with a clean white cloth. As for you, she was holding little Hu, sitting on a chair in the distance. Hades Era and the others looked at you with fear and disbelief. Everyone had a strange look on their faces. Although they looked harmonious, they felt a little strange. The fat on Lord Go's body shook. He stepped into the restaurant. Bufong, my little friend, here's my wine, Great Sage Acheron said. As soon as he finished speaking, Bufong flipped his hand, sending a green jade jar flying toward Great Sage Acheron. Great Sage Acheron grabbed the green jade jar, feeling excited. He squinted his eyes and stroked it with a satisfied expression. When Lord Go and Great Sage Acheron found out that Bufong was the formidable existence who killed Black Demon, they blinked their eyes, not believing it. Lord Go even stared at Bufong. His sharp gaze made Bufong's hair stand on end. However, after Hades Era and Inglong nodded, they had no choice but to believe it. They could choose not to believe Hades Era, but Inglong's words were credible. Hence, Lord Go and Great Sage Acheron were shocked. However, they weren't interested in Bufong's methods. The former went back to the Path Understanding Tree and slept soundly. As for Great Sage Acheron, he held the green jade jar and carefully played with it. Although Hades Era told them that Bufong had killed Black Demon with 3 punches, they were still slightly surprised. However, they were just surprised. The way Lord Go looked at Bufong had returned to normal. Bufong boy, after some exercise, Lord Go is hungry. Give me a plate of sweet and sour ribs. Lord Go looked up from under the Path Understanding Tree and said to Bufong. Bufong nodded. Then, he put down the porcelain bowl he was wiping, turned, and stepped into the kitchen. The atmosphere was still as harmonious as ever. In Nether Prison, the void was torn apart. A beam of silver light suddenly cut through the void. Stepping on a silver sword, Sword Demon Patriarch flew back to Nether Prison. Black Demon's death had stimulated him. Terrified, he fled at top speed. After returning to Nether Prison, Sword Demon Patriarch thought for a while, then put his hands behind his back and walked away with a deep look in his eyes. Instead of returning to the Sword Demon Clan's land, he flew toward the D Ting Clan's land. The next day, after entering the D Ting Clan's land, Sword Demon Patriarch left on his sword. That night, no one knew what Sword Demon Patriarch and the D Ting Clan's Patriarch discussed. The next day, the patriarchs of the 9 clans flew out of their respective clans and gathered in the D Ting Clan's land to discuss matters. It didn't last long. 3 days later, the patriarchs of the 9 clans left again. As soon as they left, the news of Nether Prison's conquest of Earth Prison spread throughout the Netherworld. Chapter 1325. The 9 clans of Nether Prison had conquered all the small worlds in the Netherworld. All the small worlds were now caught in the flames of war. Some were conquered and became Nether Prison's vassals, while others were still fighting back, spilling blood on the battlefield for their last dignity. For a moment, the cruelty of war permeated the whole Netherworld. Under such circumstances, Nether Prison actually launched a campaign against Earth Prison. As soon as the message came out, Nether Prison sent a message to Earth Prison. The whole Netherworld was shocked. Had Nether Prison really gone mad? How could they attack Earth Prison? Earth Prison was not like other small worlds. Although it did not perform well in this Netherworld's tournament of the Great Path, the weakness of the younger generation did not mean that Earth Prison was weak. There were still many experts in Earth Prison. In the West Little Buddhism realm, the sky was bathed in Buddhist light. A huge golden Buddha sat cross-legged on it, putting his palms together and chanting. His terrible voice rang through the sky. Outside the Golden Buddha were countless nether prison soldiers. They stood facing the Golden Buddha in the distance, waiting for the right time to attack the West Little Buddhism realm. The 81 pagodas in the realm burst into light at the same time. In each pagoda, a great sage's relic hovered, providing them with vast energy to form the Golden Buddha. All the cultivators in the West Little Buddhism realm were sitting cross-legged, striking wooden fishes and singing Buddhist tunes. Amitabha, a great Buddha, looked at the sky with peaceful eyes. Behind him, there was a colorful plate that shone with brilliance. Suddenly, the great Buddha's eyes froze, and then he opened them with a look of disbelief. Outside the sky, the void was torn apart. Meanwhile, several figures stepped out of the Nether Prison Army's camp. A terrible pressure swept across the world. One of them was covered in fire, as if the real nether fire could burn the heavens. He was a terrifying top great sage. There was another person who was shrouded in darkness. His faintly discernible figure seemed to be fusing with the void. Fire Demon Patriarch, Shadow Demon Patriarch. The eyes of the West Little Buddhism realm's Buddha flickered with horror. The next moment, Buddhist light towered into the sky. He flew out of the Little Buddha realm. Behind him were two great sage figures. The three Buddhas were suspended in the void, and the two figures that looked like fiend gods were confronting each other. Terrifying auras collided violently, tearing the sky apart. Buddha of the West Little Buddhism realm, let's enter the battlefield of the stars, lest we bring disaster to this world. The fire demon Patriarch grinned. His voice was gentle, but his appearance was like a burning ball of demonic fire. The great sage of the West Little Buddhism realm uttered an Amitabha as he sat cross-legged on the lotus and soared into the sky, stepping onto the battlefield of the stars. Fire Demon Patriarch laughed and charged into the battlefield of the stars with Shadow Demon Patriarch. A great battle broke out instantly. The experts of the West Little Buddhism realm and Nether Prison all looked up at the sky and saw that it had turned into a sea of fire. Rumble. There were peerless experts fighting within. After a long time, the sea of fire disappeared and the sky split open. A flaming palm that blotted out the sky slammed down. It slapped toward the huge Buddha that loomed over the West Little Buddhism realm. Boom! The whole West Little Buddhism realm shook. Then, the cultivators watched with widened eyes as the huge Buddha of the West Little Buddhism realm crumbled inch by inch in the endless sea of fire. The three great sage Buddhas who had charged into the sky were turned into ashes in the flames. 81 pagodas crumbled at the same time. The West Little Buddhism realm had fallen. In the Vajra realm, a deafening roar filled the air. A burly man with a bare upper body threw out a punch and pushed back the Nether Prison army. With both hands, a one-revolution great sage of the Nether Prison was torn in half in an instant. His terrible aura shook the heavens. Behind the burly man, there was a dense crowd of burly men who beat their chests and roared, cheering for the top great saint from the Vajra region. They laughed excitedly. When they saw the Nether Prison experts being forced back by their great sage alone, they could hardly contain their excitement. However, their laughter soon came to an abrupt end. The great sage of the Vajra realm stared at the void with his eyes wide open. Over there, the sky above the Nether Prison army was torn apart. A youth stood on top of it. His gaze was calm, and there seemed to be strength in his eyes. The patriarch of the tyrant clan. The great sage of the Vajra realm roared. Then, the youth in the sky gently punched out. The punch flew toward the great sage of the Vajra realm. It was covered with a vast amount of energy and blood essence. Chi and blood were like raging waves, and wherever they passed, many Vajra region experts were evaporated by the power of this chi and blood. Like the Vajra realm, the tyrant clan cultivated the fleshly body, and with it they could be invincible in the world. When the patriarch of the tyrant clan attacked, his power shook heaven and earth. The great sage of the Vajra realm let out an unyielding roar. He threw out a punch as well, which swept across the sky. The tyrant body versus the Vajra body. The two collided. This was a collision between the peak of the fleshly body cultivation. The void exploded. Half of the Vajra realm was shaking, and the ground was crumbling. Boom! Under the punch, the experts of the Vajra realm were instantly killed. How dare a firefly compete with the bright moon? You can only die. Take down the Vajra realm and prepare to attack Earth Prison. The tyrant patriarch clasped his hands behind his back and said lightly. His figure flickered in the void. At the same time, the patriarchs of the 9 clans appeared in every small world. The battles that could be sustained collapsed in an instant. They were all defeated. In the Heaven Chief realm, the heaven tree bloomed with supreme light, its branches swaying in the void. Every time it lashed out, a little saint would be smashed to pieces. The void floated in midair. A huge 3-horned rhinoceros hovered in it. The rhinoceros's horn was smashed, and its eyes were dark and uncertain. The Heaven Chief realm will be flattened sooner or later. Let's retreat, gather the army, and attack Earth Prison. Deafening voice rang through the 5th floor of Heaven Chief realm. Then the terrifying Nether Prison army retreated. The branches of the Heaven tree swayed and cracked. Soon, a figure emerged from the branches. The figure stood at the top of the Heaven tree, as if looking into the distance. Realm Lord Dit, naked, stood at the side of the figure, his eyes flickering. The great calamity of Earth Prison had come. How would Earth Prison survive this time? Half a month had passed since the Battle of the Great Sage. However, during this time, the whole Earth Prison did not relax at all. Instead, it became more and more tense. It was as if there was a sharp sword hanging over everyone's head. This made every Earth Prison expert feel an extreme sense of crisis. They also knew that this was the prelude to the coming war. The Nether Prison experts were going to attack Earth Prison. This was absolutely disastrous news for Earth Prison's experts. Earth Prison was strong, but Nether Prison was stronger. It was hard to say whether Earth Prison could withstand Nether Prison's attack. If Hades Tenzang were still here, they might not be so worried. After all, Hades Tenzang was the pride of Earth Prison. However, Tian Tsang had fallen. Although the current Hades had become the Great Sage, he was still growing and could not stand on his own. Nether Prison, on the other hand, had the Great Sage Patriarch of the 9 clans. Therefore, Earth Prison's experts felt a haze hanging over their heads. Forbidden Soul City had been rebuilt. He gave a new name, Yellow Spring City. Today, Acheron City had become the most popular place in Earth Prison. Countless Earth Prison experts had gathered here. After all, Acheron City was the safest place in Earth Prison. With Earth Prison Dog and Great Sage Acheron City, the 2 peerless experts of Earth Prison, here, even if a war broke out, they could find some comfort. Of course, the strangest thing was the mysterious little restaurant in Acheron City. Acheron City's little restaurant. There was a long and narrow line of people standing in front of the restaurant. These people were from the aristocratic families of hell. The experts of these families were all very powerful. But now, they were all waiting in front of the restaurant. Before long, some people walked out of the restaurant, their faces full of satisfaction. Rumble. Someone walked out of the restaurant. He walked a few steps drunkenly, then sat cross-legged on the ground and began to break through. The whole of Acheron City had been shrouded in lightning punishment during this period of time. Inside the restaurant, Bu Fong frowned. Looking at the long and narrow line outside, he couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. After Nether Prison announced its war against Earth Prison, the whole Earth Prison was boiling. Nether Prison experts, who were not eager to improve their strength, rushed to his restaurant like crazy. They spent 1 million nether crystals to buy the supreme grade Acheron Helplessness wine. This greatly increased the sales of the supreme grade Acheron Helplessness wine. This made Bufong feel extremely strange. Did Nether Prison increase the sales of his store's fine wine? Should he thank Nether Prison? Meanwhile, the experts who drank the supreme grade Acheron Helplessness wine broke through one after another. The great sage of Acheron City sat in the restaurant, fiddling with a jade jar. He was reluctant to drink the wine in the jar. He would rather spend 1 million nether crystals to buy it than drink his own wine. This strange behavior made Bu Fong quite speechless. Glancing at the wine in the jar, Bu Fong breathed a soft sigh of relief and closed the lid. He would no longer sell the Acheron helplessness wine. Then, he turned to the group of people waiting in line. With an indifferent face, he said, "The supreme-grade Acheron helplessness wine has been sold out. From now on, there will be no more supreme-grade Acheron helplessness wine." Bu Fong's voice was not loud, but with the help of his divine will, it spread throughout the whole Acheron city. The faces of the experts waiting in line outside the restaurant turned very unsightly. What many people were worried about had finally come true. After all, the supreme-grade Acheron helplessness wine was limited. Because of their hesitation, those who came later to buy the wine could no longer buy it. Many people left dejectedly. Some people complained to Bu Fong. Some even knelt in front of the restaurant, crying and begging to buy the wine, and even offered double the price. However, Bu Fong still refused. It was not that he didn't want to sell it, but Bu Fong would not sell the rest of the wine. Bu Fong knew what they were thinking. When the war began, the stronger one was, the greater the chance of survival would be. However, Bu Fong had his own principles. He closed the restaurant's door. Bu Fong went into the kitchen. He began to cook. Before long, he walked out of the kitchen with a steaming plate of sweet and sour ribs. He placed it on the table. Lord Go had already placed his paws on the table, looking forward to it. As soon as the steaming sweet and sour ribs was placed on the table, the sparkling sauce under the light attracted Lord Go's taste buds. It made Lord Go salivate. Ring, ring. Bu Fong walked out of the kitchen again. This time, he held a bowl of dragon blood rice, which was overflowing with essence energy. Although Yu's curse had fused a lot, it still needed to be suppressed. Dragon blood rice couldn't be better. As for Little Hu, Bu Fong had prepared a plate of explosive meatballs and divine seal dumplings for him. On this day, after Lord Go finished his sweet and sour ribs, he left. No one knew where Lord Go went. After he was full, she went back to her room to sleep. As for Little Hu, he swallowed several explosive meatballs. His eyes instantly widened. Behind his buttocks, a bulge appeared, and his fair fox face was flushed red from holding it in. With a smacking sound, the third tail sprang out from his butt. The three white tails danced in the air. Little Hu narrowed his eyes in excitement. Bu Fong calmly sat in front of the table. Swish! The dense wine was poured into a porcelain cup. As soon as the wine entered his stomach, essence energy swept through Bu Fong's abdomen. Buzz! Congratulations to the host for completing the stipulated turnover task. Now, the promotion begins. The serious voice of the system resounded in Bu Fong's mind. On the eve of Nether Prison's attack on Earth Prison, the long-awaited promotion notification of the system finally resounded in Bu Fong's mind. Chapter 1326. The system's serious voice rang in his head. It was a familiar voice, but in Bu Fong's head, it seemed to be very far away. Finally, I've advanced again. Bu Fong sighed inwardly. With a thought, he sank into his body and began to look at the system panel. Host, Bu Fong True Energy Cultivation Base. 9 Revolution Little Saint Cooking Talent. 9 Star Skills. Level 2 Meteor Knife Technique. 100 out of 100. Level 2 Big Dipper Carving Technique. 100 out of 100. Level 1 Knife Technique. Overlord 13 Blades. 13 out of 13. Gourmet Array. 5 out of 6. Cutting Immortal Style. 3 out of 3. Items. Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife. God of Cooking Set. Black Turtle Constellation Wok. God of Cooking Set. Vermilion Chef Robe. God of Cooking Set. White Tiger Heaven Stove. God of Cooking Set. God of Cooking Overall Rating. Supreme Grade Chilean Chef, able to integrate the will of the Great Path into the ingredients. The food cooked will have a magical effect and cause a sensation. System Level. Level 4 helps the host embark on the road to becoming the God of Cooking. System Reward. 1 fragment of the God of Cooking Set. 3/5. 1 dish. The cooking method of the Fortune Flatbread of Mixed Elements. And the Gourmet Array. Time. Bu Fong rubbed his chin. Bu Fong looked at the system panel, deep in thought. Many things on the panel had changed, and there were many new things. The first thing that Bufong noticed was the fragment of the God of Cooking set. This time, he had obtained another fragment of the God of Cooking set. This was a pleasant surprise. Moreover, he was right. This time, he only needed 5 pieces to successfully collect the God of Cooking set, and up until now, he had already collected 3 pieces. Once he finished collecting 5 fragments, he could summon the last fragment of the God of Cooking set. To be honest, Bufong was a little excited. Of course, in addition to the pleasant surprise of the God of Cooking set, Bufong also noticed other rewards. It was rare that the system actually provided a dish as a reward for this task. According to common sense, the dish as a reward for this kind of advancement should be extraordinary. Therefore, he was very much looking forward to the fortune flatbread the system had mentioned. After reading the recipe for the fortune flatbread, Bufong gasped. Not only that, but the effects of the fortune flatbread also shocked Bufong. The third reward was the long-awaited gourmet array. There were a total of 6 portions of the gourmet array. So far, Bufong had collected 5 portions. The 5th one represented time. What was the use of this gourmet array? Bufong furrowed his brows. Perhaps it was another useless gourmet array. It was just like the defense array of the gourmet array. Because he was wearing the vermilion robe, Bufong did not spend too much time studying the defensive formation. No matter how strong the defense was, could it be stronger than the invincibility of the vermilion robe? In short, this advancement was within reason. Of course, the reward for advancing made Bufong quite happy. What made him the happiest was the breakthrough of his strength. Every advancement was a breakthrough across stages. Today, Bufong had broken through from the 2nd stage Little Saint to the 9th stage Little Saint. His speed of breaking through was comparable to that of you, who had eaten the 3-cup divine chicken. Bufong sat in a chair, his eyes slightly thoughtful. He held a wine glass in his hand, which was still swirling with wine. He crossed his legs with a satisfied look on his face. You and Little, who were playing on the side. Suddenly, both of them seemed to have sensed something, and they turned their heads to look at Bufong. Little, whose 3 tails were wagging, and his big eyes were blinking. The look in Yu's eyes became more and more strange. Boom! There was a muffled sound. Waves of true energy seemed to spread from Bufong's body. The ripples spread in the void, as if the void could not bear the burden. He broke through. Yu asked in surprise. Boom! Boom! As the ripples spread, there seemed to be the sound of something exploding. Compared to Yu's breakthrough, Bufong's was more direct. In one breath, he directly soared into the sky. From a 2nd stage Little Saint, he reached the 9th stage Little Saint in a flash. This time, if Hades' era saw it, he would probably be scared out of his wits. Perhaps he would be a little confused. Were breakthroughs so cheap nowadays? The breakthrough did not last long. After a long time, Bufong opened his eyes. His eyes were very calm, as if breaking through was as common as eating and drinking. He glanced at Yu and Little who were in a daze in the distance. Bufong grabbed the wine glass, stood up, and went into the kitchen. After a moment of confusion, Nethery and Foxy began to play with each other again. This was enough to shock the outside world, but in the store, it became a normal thing. Bufong placed the glass in the kitchen. Bufong's mind flickered. He entered the heaven and earth farmland. As soon as he entered the farmland, Nyohan-san sensed the existence of Bufong's aura, so he flew over. In a short while, he arrived in front of Bufong. Sizing up Bufong, Nyohan-san stared at Bufong, which made the latter's hair stand on end. What's wrong? Bufong looked at Nyohan-san, puzzled. Owner Bu, this old bull thought I would never see you again. Then, Nyohan-san shouted, spreading his arms and flying toward Bufong. However, Bufong naturally wouldn't let him succeed. He raised his hand, placing a finger on Nyohan-san's forehead, preventing the latter from moving forward or retreating. All right, I came to the heaven and earth farmland today to see the situation inside. Also, I want you to prepare some spirit rice for me. Bufong said. Nyohan-san had already regained his composure. He widened his eyes, and after saying that, he turned around to prepare the spirit rice. Bufong, on the other hand, wandered around the heaven and earth farmland. He had to admit that the heaven and earth farmland was becoming more and more real. The entire farmland was filled with the chirping of birds and the fragrance of flowers. It was filled with dense spirit energy. Taking a deep breath, the moist and sweet air went into one's nose, making one feel as if his body and mind had been cleansed. In the river, the spring of life flowed, and the little white dragon formed by the spring of life dashed around. The blood lobster waved its pincers as if it had become the tyrant of the river. On the ground, the grass swayed as 80 and the 8 treasures pig ran. The 3-eyed wild lion was lazily lying on the ground, snoring loudly. The many treasures heaven tree stood in front of the wooden house. The heaven tree swayed, emitting radiance. The heaven tree's existence made the plants and creatures in the farmland grow unceasingly. On the tree, a pure white, senseless lotus bloomed quietly, like a snow lotus on an ice mountain. The senseless lotus had a strange energy that filled the entire space. This scene made Bufong's mood calm. In the distance, Nyo Han-san returned quickly. He was holding a cloth bag in his hand, and the bag was filled with spirit rice. Receiving the cloth bag from Nyo Han-san, Bufong reached his hand into it. The cold and moist spirit rice brushed his finger. The moist feeling made Bufong narrow his eyes. He was very satisfied. Carrying the cloth bag, Bufong said goodbye to Nyo Han-san and left the farmland. Nyo Han-san stood in front of the wooden house, clasping his hands. Looking at Bufong's back as he left, he could feel the earth-shaking change in Bufong's body. When the farmland was shaken, Nyo Han-san thought that Bufong was in trouble. It seemed that Bufong had blocked the calamity, and now he seemed to have been reborn. This kind of harvest, after blocking the calamity, was absolutely huge. Back in the kitchen, Bufong poured out the spirit rice. Of course, this spirit rice wasn't ordinary. It contained the farmland's will of the great path. And Bufong needed this spirit rice to make the reward he had just received, the mixed essence fortune flatbread, or fortune flatbread for short. The name sounded very fresh and refined. Of course, more than that, Bufong was surprised by the fortune flatbread's ability. The fortune flatbread, one creation. The flatbread baked with the extremely difficult 9-fire dragon charge fire control technique contains the creation of heaven and earth. After being eaten, the creation can be used on the diner. The so-called good fortune varies according to the diner's own luck. Those with strong luck can obtain top-notch good fortune, while those with weak luck can obtain ordinary good fortune after eating it. The system's prompt rang in Bufong's mind. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched. The so-called creation was naturally not ordinary. For example, if you ate the 3-cup divine chicken, you could directly break through from the 2nd revolution Little Saint to the 9th revolution Little Saint. This could be considered a heaven-defying creation. Although the top creation couldn't compare to this, it wasn't weak either. At the very least, good fortune was beneficial to people. The fortune flatbread can be taken away. You could buy 3 at a time, Bufong pondered. He suddenly felt that another hot dish was about to be born. Of course, before that, Bufong had to make the fortune flatbread. At the thought of this, Bufong rolled up his sleeves excitedly, ready to make the mixed essence fortune flatbread. Earth Prison, Black Temple, Rumble. The fall of Black Demon, the master of the Forbidden Land, made the Black Temple ownerless. After Black Demon's death, the Black Temple, which was shrouded in a terrible energy, began to change dramatically. Streams of energy, which could not be seen clearly before, suddenly emerged. In the void, it was suddenly torn apart. Several figures emerged in the sky. Lord Go, Hades Era, and Prison Overlord Inglong were all hovering in the void. They looked at the flickering Black Temple in silence. With Black Demon's death, the Forbidden Land is ownerless and about to turn into the dust of history. The power of the law that seals the Forbidden Land will begin to dissipate, and the treasures of the Black Temple from 2 eras will be exposed. Hades Era said excitedly. With Black Demon's death, the treasures in the Black Temple became delicious steamed buns. Rumble. In the Black Temple, as the energy collapsed, one expert after another from the Black Temple dashed out of it. Everyone's face was filled with horror. They wanted to escape, but they had the mark of the Forbidden Land on them. Once they stepped out, they would be turned to ashes by the Black Lightning. This was the destruction of the power of the law. It meant that the Black Temple, which had existed for 2 eras, had truly disappeared. In the face of the Black Lightning that contained the power of the law, even Lord Go didn't dare to touch it easily. It was the power of the forbidden. Rumble. In the distant sky, a golden skeleton was watching from afar, the blood-colored flame burning in its eye sockets. The fate of the Black Temple made Jean Lu completely silent. He raised his head and glanced at the sky. There, Lord Go, Hades Era, and the others all turned to look at Jean Lu. Jean Lu didn't say anything, but his eyes seemed to be filled with endless sadness. Perhaps this was the tragic end of these living beings who had lingered on with their last breaths into this era. Jean Lu was gone. The power of the law that enveloped the Black Temple finally disappeared. The terrible power of the law that had imprisoned the Black Temple for an era finally dissipated. From now on, the Black Temple would no longer exist in Earth Prison. After the power of the law disappeared, Lord Go, Hades Era, and the others flew into it. All the creatures in the Black Temple had died under the power of the law, but the treasures inside were not destroyed. These things were all treasures. The fact that they could survive from the last era to this one naturally showed that they were precious. It just so happened that Nether Prison was invading. With the Black Temple's treasures, the strength of Earth Prison's army would be greatly improved. For a moment, 2 men and 1 dog took away almost everything in the Black Temple. In the depths of the sky, a graceful figure stood in the sky, wearing a long white robe and looking peerless. Saint glanced at the Black Temple, which had lost its power of the law, and sighed softly. The next moment, she took a step forward and returned to the god-vanishing mountain that belonged to her. Acheron's little store. Bufong had ground all the spirit rice into powder and was calmly rubbing his hands. He was preparing to make the fortune flatbread that he had been looking forward to. Chapter 13:27. Swish, grains of wheat, which looked like pearls, slid down from Bufong's hand. Looking at the lovely, bouncing wheat, Bufong couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. He pinched a grain of wheat with his thumb and forefinger, then lifted it up. Under the light, the wheat seemed to be transparent like a gem. This wheat, which contained the will of the Great Path, was indeed extraordinary. His mind flickered. Bufong, on the other hand, took out a stone mill and ground the wheat that was shaken off from the spirit rice into flour. The fine flour was white, pure white. Bufong took out the processed flour. Then, he took out a blue and white porcelain pot. He poured the flour into the pot and the spring of life, which contained rich energy essence, into it. The fortune flatbread of primeval chaos was not a dish in the God of Cooking's menu, so the ingredients used were all the top ingredients that Bufong could use so far. Swish, he poured water into the flour, added yeast, and began to knead it. In a short while, it had become a huge ball of flour. Bufong's movements were very rhythmic, and he used every bit of his strength just right. Kneading dough was actually a technical job, and he needed to master the appropriate technique. Buzz as Bufong kneaded it. The dough in the porcelain pot began to spin, becoming more and more translucent, as if there was light flowing over it. As soon as his palm touched the dough, a burst of elasticity bounced off Bufong's palm. Bufong took out a bowl of oil, poured the translucent oil into the porcelain pot, and continued to knead the dough. This time, his kneading movements were different. Because of the addition of oil, the dough was very creamy. As he kneaded, all the oil was mixed into the dough. The dough, which was as fair as a baby's skin, suddenly turned muddy yellow. This was because it had absorbed the oil. Adding oil and kneading it into the dough was also to enhance the taste of the fortune flatbread. The oil he chose was also meticulously brewed vegetable oil, not animal oil. He kneaded the oil into the dough. He placed the blue and white porcelain pot aside and waited for the dough to ferment. It took a long time. Bufang did not stand in front of the kitchen and wait. Instead, she wiped her palms. He took a layer of gauze and covered the dough with it. Then, he walked out of the kitchen with a teapot in his hand. He walked into the restaurant. He pulled over a chair and curled up on it. He sat at the door and looked outside. The clouds were drifting slowly, and he felt quite content. After leisurely drinking tea for a while, Bufang returned to the kitchen. He lit the fire and opened the pot. He placed the black turtle constellation wok on the stove and poured the golden oil into the wok. When the oil boiled, he poured the flour into it. He began to stir-fry the flour. After the flour turned into a pastry, he took it out and poured it into a bowl. After fermentation and awakening, the dough swelled a little, and the qi contained in it was circulating. He took out the dough, kneaded it into a pancake, spread the pastry on it, and sprinkled the sparkling white sugar on it. He rolled up the huge flatbread and cut it into 4 pieces. Each piece was flattened from a cut point. Soon, it was pressed into 4 flatbread pieces. He took out a kind of spirit fruit, cut it in half, and placed it on the flatbread. Then, he sprinkled some sesame seeds on it. The initial stage of the flatbread was completed. Next was the most important process of the fortune flatbread, baking. It was not easy to bake a fortune flatbread. This flatbread was called the fortune flatbread of primordial chaos. The name was quite long, but there was an important point. What was the fortune flatbread of primordial chaos? It was worth studying, and it had a lot to do with the baking method. His mind flickered. A huge shadow emerged. With a boom, the shadow was smashed to the ground. It was a huge oven. This oven was not ordinary. It was made of mud, and its surface was uneven. It was even a little black. It gave off a rustic air. It was more than 2 meters high and 1 meter in diameter, and it was wrapped in a layer of yellow mud. It was called the charcoal oven. After preparing the oven, Bufang entered the heaven and earth farmland. He swayed around the myriad treasures heaven tree and broke a few slender branches of the heaven tree. This made the myriad treasures heaven tree shake its branches as if it wanted to fight with Bufang. After taking the branches, Bufang ran away as fast as he could. He returned to the kitchen. He placed the branches in the middle of the charcoal oven, opened his mouth, and spat out a mass of white flame. The flame flew out and fell into the charcoal oven, igniting the branches of the heaven tree. After doing all this, Bufang retreated to the side. The fortune flatbread needed top-grade materials to make. Even the branches used to warm the fire were the branches of the heaven tree, which were absolutely high-end. Squeak! The flames burned in the oven, and the rolling flames seemed to be boiling. As the branches of the immortal tree burned, wisps of smoke filled the air. Moreover, the scorching heat attached to the walls of the oven, distorting the air and temperature inside. There was a reason why the charcoal oven was used. The flatbread baked with this thing was the real flatbread. After a long time, the branches of the heaven tree were finally burned out. After all, it was just a small branch that Bufang had taken from the heaven tree, so it wasn't much. Bufang stepped on the air and soared into the sky. He held the finished flatbread in his hand. He came to the mouth of the charcoal oven. He raised his head and looked at the mouth of the oven. Inside, the ashes of the heaven tree branches were still emitting a high temperature. This high temperature was what Bufang needed. Holding the flatbread in one hand, Bufang's eyes narrowed. Holding the flatbread, he reached his hand into the charcoal oven. As soon as the flatbread entered the oven, the scorching heat seemed to melt Bufang's arm. Even though Bufang had reached the 9-revolution Little Saint cultivation base, he was still quite shocked by this temperature. After all, it was left by the burning branches of the heaven tree. However, this was what Bufang needed. Clatter! Bufang slapped the flatbread in his hand on the wall of the oven. Sizzle! Sizzle! In an instant, the flatbread made a sizzling sound. Under the scorching heat, it began to change. Bufang repeated the same action and slapped the rest of the biscuits onto the furnace wall. Before long, the furnace wall was covered with 18 biscuits. 18 flatbread in one furnace was not bad. Bufang reached out his hand. His arm had already turned red. It was burned by the scorching heat in the oven. To be honest, the making of the fortune flatbread was really a technical job. He sat cross-legged on the ground. His mental force immediately surged, spreading toward the oven. In just a short while, strand after strand of it spread into the furnace, covering the entire furnace. He began to carefully observe the changes of the flatbread in the oven. Time flew. Almost 6 hours had passed. The flatbread was finished. Bu Fong, who was sitting cross-legged, opened his eyes and retracted his mental force. Buzz! Instantly, a dazzling light burst out from the mouth of the oven. It soared into the sky, turning into a beam of light. Rumble! In the sky of Earth Prison, rolling thunder clouds emerged. Xiao Bai's eyes flashed, and he walked straight out of the kitchen. Resisting the lightning punishment had always been his job, and Xiao Bai enjoyed it very much. Bu Fong's eyes shone brightly. Slowly, he stood up. Outside the restaurant, thunder and lightning surged, and the terrible lightning punishment kept rumbling. This attracted the attention of many experts in the vicinity. With the appearance of the lightning punishment, they knew that the owner of Acheron's little restaurant was cooking delicious food again. Acheron Valley Great Sage Acheron, who was holding a jade jar with one hand, sat cross-legged, humming a tune. He was in a good mood. All of a sudden, he narrowed his eyes, looking at the location of Acheron's little restaurant. His eyes sparkled. This scene, Bu Fong, my little friend, is cooking delicious food again? Great Sage Acheron's eyes lit up. Only Bu Fong's new dish could make him so excited. Getting up from the recliner, Great Sage Acheron tidied up his clothes. Holding the jade jar, he walked in the air, heading toward Bu Fong's restaurant. In front of the restaurant, few people stood in front of the door. Since Nether Prison was going to attack Earth Prison, many experts had left Acheron City to join the army. They were all from Earth Prison, so they naturally had to fight for Earth Prison's dignity. Therefore, there were not many people in Acheron City today. However, the scene of the dish transcending the tribulation still attracted many curious onlookers. Sizzle. After Xiao Bai had transcended the tribulation, there seemed to be lightning arcs jumping over his body, and a terrible aura was spreading. As Bu Fong broke through to the level of the 9 Revolution Little Saint, Xiao Bai's aura became more and more oppressive. It was not clear how strong Xiao Bai's fighting prowess was now. In the restaurant, Yu and Little, who had already craned their necks in anticipation. The man and the fox moved very synchronously. A fragrance filled the air. It was the fragrance of flatbread. The extreme aroma of the biscuit made their eyes light up. In the kitchen, Bu Fong stood in front of a huge oven. He reached into the oven, took out the fortune flatbreads, and placed them on a plate. Clack, clack. The fortune flatbread that was taken out of the oven looked very tempting. The surface of the biscuit was golden in color, and the juice of the spirit fruit embedded in it flowed around, making the biscuit even more attractive. The back of the flatbread was not as smooth and round, but it did not affect its taste. Every piece of flatbread was emitting steaming hot steam. It was as if one could not hold it with one hand. After placing the 3 flatbread on a blue and white porcelain plate, Bu Fong walked out of the kitchen with them. Ting-a-ling. The curtain was lifted. Many expecting gazes were directed at him. Bu Fong's face was calm. He carried the plate to the table. He placed the plate on it. Yu and Little, who immediately looked at the fortune flatbread on the plate. Outside the door, a burst of laughter rang out. The great sage of Acheron flew in with a jade jar in one hand. After a while, he landed in the restaurant. Bu Fong, my little friend, I can smell the rich fragrance from afar. What delicious food are you cooking this time? The great sage of Acheron twitched his nose, looking quite intoxicated. Bu Fong glanced at the great sage of Acheron and couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Does this guy have a dog's nose? I can smell it. However, he didn't say anything. He just raised his hand and pointed at the fortune flatbread on the table. Although the fortune flatbread looked tempting, it did not look very attractive. Compared with those delicious dishes that were overflowing with fragrance and brilliant colors, it was rather dry. But it was just a flatbread after all. This flatbread is called the fortune flatbread. The fortune flatbread of primordial energy Bufong said. After that, he raised his hand and grabbed a flatbread. Bufong was very curious about the effect of the fortune flatbread. Under the curious gazes of you and little who, Bufong threw the flatbread to you. He gave one to the great sage of Acheron and grabbed the last one himself. What's so good about a dry flatbread? It's better to make barbecue meat. The taste of meat is much better than a dry flatbread. The great sage of Acheron looked at the hot flatbread in his hand and twitched his mouth, looking a little unhappy. Oh, you don't want to eat it? Then give it back to me. Bufong glanced at the great sage of Acheron and said. The great sage of Acheron smiled awkwardly. Eat, eat, eat. My little friend Bufong, who can brew the supreme grade Acheron helplessness wine, will definitely make an extraordinary flatbread. Today, I will sacrifice myself to be a gentleman. The great sage of Acheron smiled. Then, he grabbed the fortune flatbread, opened his mouth, and took a bite. A crisp crunching sound rang out. However, he didn't bite the flatbread off. Under the crispy skin, there was a tender texture. More importantly, the great sage of Acheron's eyes went wide when he sensed the fortune flatbread in his mouth. Chapter 1328. The Fortune Flatbread of Primordial Chaos. Just from the name, one could tell that it was extraordinary. Originally, the great sage Acheron didn't care about this flatbread at all. In his opinion, how delicious could a flatbread be? How could a cake made of flour compare to the delicacies of the land and sea? What had he, the great sage Acheron, not eaten before? How could he yield to a mere flatbread? Then, the great sage Acheron took a bite of the flatbread and chose to yield. Crunch! The crispy flatbread surface was instantly bitten. After the golden flatbread surface was bitten, the soft and tender meat inside was exposed. It was incomparably tender and fragrant. As he continued to bite, there seemed to be a majestic aura that was about to gush out of the flatbread. That feeling made the great sage Acheron's eyes widen in disbelief. That was because, with the great sage's cultivation base, he could naturally sense the aura that was about to gush out of the flatbread. It was the aura materialized by the will of the great path. What was going on? The illusory will of the great path could materialize into a gas. Crunch! Crunch! He took a bite of the flatbread. The meat was sweet, and his mouth was filled with a unique taste. It was the taste of charcoal, pure and authentic. This feeling was unexpectedly blissful. The aura formed by the will of the great path flowed through his mouth, making a cool, sizzling sound as it entered his body. Was the so-called good fortune the aura materialized by the will of the great path? Primordial chaos? Was that what it was talking about? The flatbread had a wisp of primordial chaos energy, and it dared to make the great sage laugh at the heavens? The great sage Acheron's eyes focused again, and a bright light shot out from his eyes. It was different. It was completely different. As the flatbread entered his stomach, the wisp of aura entered the great sage Acheron's body, but he couldn't sense it anymore. His divine will couldn't sense the aura of the will of the great path. What was going on? The great sage Acheron suddenly shuddered. He felt even more incredulous. Was his flatbread so magical? Suddenly, great sage Acheron's eyes widened. At that moment, he looked at his muscular, bulging arms. He discovered that there seemed to be an infinite power bursting out of his arm. The speed of the bursting made the great sage Acheron shudder. This flatbread, could it be that it can increase one's physical strength? Great sage Acheron said in shock. The muscles on his body bulged, and his chest muscles were huge. His clothes were tight, and he had a fit figure. He was the great sage. How could he strengthen the great sage? How terrifying would that be? For the great sage, the more powerful his physical body became in battle, the more he would be able to crush his opponents. Increase my physical strength. Bufong glanced at the great sage Acheron, his eyes full of sympathy. It seems that your luck is really bad, Bufong said lightly. Then, while the great sage Acheron was stunned, Bufong grabbed the fortune flatbread of primordial chaos and took a bite. A crunching sound rang out. The fragrant flatbread was chewed by Bufong in his mouth. The crispy exterior and moist, tender biscuit meat indeed gave people a special experience. It was intoxicating. Great Sage Acheron bit the flatbread and stared at Bufong. Apart from the enchanting effect of the flatbread, the taste alone was very attractive. However, the Great Sage Acheron still didn't understand what Bufong meant by bad luck. How could eating flatbread have anything to do with luck? The difficulty of making the fortune flatbread was not high, but it was not easy either. The main reason was that the charcoal oven was more difficult to operate, and there were many tricks involved. The baking of the charcoal oven squeezed out the will of the great path in the flour, turning it into a wisp of energy that kept flowing. This energy was the essence of the fortune flatbread, just like a human soul. The primordial chaos energy was the soul of the flatbread. This chi was the so-called good fortune. Bufong took a bite of the flatbread. Soon, Bufong's eyes focused. Bufong opened his eyes, and the energy kept flowing in his body. Bufong's mental force began to soar, becoming stronger and stronger. He released his divine will. Originally, the maximum range that his divine will could cover was 100 miles. But at this moment, the range that Bufong's divine will could cover was getting bigger and bigger. It had reached 1,000 miles. Great Sage Acheron sucked in a cold breath. How was that possible? The breakthrough of mental force was more difficult than the breakthrough of cultivation base. Bufong had just eaten a flatbread, and the range of his mental force had already reached such a level. Then what was the point of cultivating? Everyone should just go and eat the flatbread. Well, my luck seems to be better than yours. Bufong glanced at Great Sage Acheron, the corners of his mouth twitching. Great Sage Acheron was dumbfounded. What did this guy mean? Why was eating a flatbread related to luck? What was this guy trying to say? Crack. You held the flatbread, parted her red lips, and took a bite. The surface of the flatbread broke, and a fragrant and tender taste poured into her body. Yu's eyes lit up. The energy of the will of the great path entered her body. Then, under Great Sage Acheron's dumbfounded gaze, Yu's aura skyrocketed. From the 9 Revolution Little Saint, she directly broke through to the 1st Revolution Great Sage, the 2nd Revolution Great Sage, and the 3rd Revolution Great Sage. In the end, her cultivation stagnated. Great Sage Acheron was dumbfounded. He was so shocked that he almost dropped the precious jade jar in his hand. What was going on? Who could tell him what was going on? She had just eaten a bite of the flatbread, and this woman had broken through from the 9 Revolution Little Saint to the 3rd Revolution Great Sage. With a Great Sage so cheap now, she could break through just by eating a flatbread. I worked hard and cultivated for 10,000 years to become a Great Sage. This woman, Great Sage Acheron's mouth was trembling. As a Great Sage, he understood how difficult it was to become a Great Sage. Moreover, after reaching the Great Sage's level, it would be even more difficult to break through to the next revolution. However, when he sensed Yu's rapid breakthrough, he felt extremely helpless. Great Sage Acheron felt a deep sense of helplessness. It was scary to compare oneself to others. He finally understood what Bufong was talking about when he talked about luck. He had eaten a flatbread, but his skin was a little harder. Bufong was in a better condition than him, as his mental energy had increased several times. As for that woman, she was even more monstrous. She directly rushed to the 3rd Revolution Great Sage. Compared to that woman, his luck was indeed crap. Bufong retracted his divine will, leisurely eating the flatbread. The group of people outside, who had been watching them, were already dumbfounded. After the supreme grade Acheron's helplessness wine, did Owner Boo cook another peerless dish? It could make one break through to the Great Sage's realm in a flash. This flatbread was going to be popular. This was the same thought in everyone's mind. Well, fortune flatbread of mixed element, 50,000 nether crystals per flatbread, and each person can buy 3 flatbreads a day. Bufong took a bite of the flatbread and glanced at Great Sage Acheron, whose lips were trembling. The price that Bu Fong shouted stunned everyone. 50,000 nether crystals per flatbread? This flatbread, which had the same effect as the supreme grade Acheron's helplessness. Why was it so cheap? A cup of that wine cost 1 million nether crystals, so this flatbread should at least cost 1 million nether crystals, right? Otherwise, how could it be called this effective? In fact, only Bu Fong knew the reason. Although the fortune flatbread's effect was heaven-defying, and it contained the will of the Great Path, which could enhance the user's strength in various ways, this enhancement was based on luck. If one's luck was good, the enhancement would be quite heaven-defying. Take you, for example. This was a great fortune. If one's luck was bad, the enhancement would be very ordinary, such as strengthening one's body or something. Take Great Sage Acheron, for example. This kind of enhancement was like a joke made by God. As for Bu Fong's mental force enhancement, it was actually not bad. The enhancement of his divine will from 100 miles to 1,000 miles was equivalent to stepping into a mature state from an immature divine will. If he cultivated slowly, it would take a long time. However, when Bu Fong sensed this state, it would be much easier for him to cultivate to 1,000 miles divine will in the future. Even so, the fortune flatbread shouldn't be so cheap, right? In fact, the reason was the fortune of the flatbread didn't last long, and everything was caused by the mixed element. When the mixed element was used up, the fortune would disappear. This lasted for about an hour. When Bu Fong explained the reason, everyone was stunned. Everyone was enlightened. Great Sage Acheron narrowed his eyes and nodded. He knew that if his 10,000 years of cultivation couldn't compare to a little girl taking a bite of flatbread, he should go and hit his head against a wall. However, when he glanced at the flatbread in his hand, he didn't believe it. The enhancement of my physical strength is indeed due to bad luck. But I don't believe that my luck will always be so bad. So, Owner Bu, give me another flatbread. Great Sage Acheron's nostrils seemed to be about to snort. Bu Fong glanced at Great Sage Acheron and didn't say anything. Then, he went into the kitchen and took out a basket of flatbread. The fortune flatbread is now on sale. Each flatbread costs 50,000 nether crystals, and each person is limited to 3 flatbreads a day. Let me tell you something. With a fortune flatbread, you'll have more means on the battlefield, and you'll have more chances of survival. If any of you has heaven-defying luck and breaks through to the 9 Revolution Great Sage by eating a flatbread, you'll be the most awesome person in the world, respected by all, and dominate the battlefield. Bu Fong said. His words were sonorous and forceful, as if they were true. In fact, although the fortune flatbread could give people fortune, it was impossible to break through to the 9 Revolution Great Sage unless one was a great sage. Moreover, only a great sage with heaven-defying luck eating a flatbread could achieve such an effect. An ordinary little saint who could reach the level of you was already on the verge of going to heaven. As soon as Bu Fong's words rang out, everyone outside the restaurant went crazy. That was right. Owner Bu was right. The fortune flatbread could really be their life-saving means. When they were in a desperate situation, a flatbread was their hope. If they took a bite of it, if their luck burst out, they would become a 9 Revolution Great Sage and turn the tide on the battlefield. Then, they would become the heroes of the whole Earth prison. Owner Bu, don't say anything. Give me 3 first. An expert shouted impatiently. 150,000 nether crystals for a chance to bring glory to their ancestors. It was a F*** bargain. Since they could cultivate to such a level, they were all obsessed with their luck. Just like the great sage Acheron. He was very confident in his luck. So, after eating the first flatbread in a hurry, when half an hour was up and the ability was gone, he eagerly took a bite of the second one. Another stream of energy flowed out of the flatbread and poured into his body. Then, the great sage Acheron felt as if his body was about to explode. He opened his mouth and spat out a scorching fireball. As soon as the fireball flew out, Xiaobai slapped it away and made it disappear. Congratulations! You've unlocked the luck of fate once again. You've gained the ability to spit fireballs. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched as he looked at the great sage Acheron and said seriously, "How bad is the luck of the great sage Acheron to be able to unlock such a low-end ability? Did he offend the goddess of luck?" The great sage Acheron's face darkened. The ability to spit fireballs? When he thought about eating a flatbread on the battlefield and getting the ability to spit fireballs, the great sage Acheron felt like a child abandoned by the heaven. Well, the fortune of the fortune flatbread is not ordinary. To a large extent, it can give you a permanent ability, but it's rare. Bufong stroked his chin as he recalled the words the system had said in a serious tone. He couldn't help but tell the others about it. The aura of the great sage had faded from Yu's body, and she had returned to the level of the little saint of the 9 Revolution. She didn't feel any discomfort. There was no doubt that the fortune flatbread would not bring any side effects. You had not finished the flatbread in her hand, so she gave a little of it to Little Hu. Sticking out his tongue, he ate the flatbread and narrowed his eyes in happiness. The 3 tails were shaking continuously. "Bufong, boy, give me another flatbread. I don't believe that my luck is so bad," the great sage Acheron said, unconvinced. Obtaining the ability to spit fireballs is simply a joke. Am I, the great sage, here to make a show? After spitting several fireballs in a row, the great sage Acheron's eyes turned red. He bought a flatbread from Bufong and grabbed it in his hand. Then, the great sage Acheron finished the second flatbread angrily. The experts outside the door had already gone crazy. They lined up again to buy the fortune flatbread. An hour later, the great sage Acheron's eyes suddenly lit up. They were as sharp as the brightest star in the night. He picked up the flatbread, grinned excitedly, and spat out a fireball. Looking at the fireball, the great sage Acheron was stunned. Bufong was also shocked, sucking in a breath of cold air. Chapter 1329. The most frightening thing was that the air suddenly became quiet. The great sage Acheron was stunned. His eyes widened as he looked at Bufong. The look of disbelief in his eyes was like a bolt of lightning that pierced through the sky. Bufong was also stunned. He slightly opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. The great sage Acheron raised the biscuit in his hand and looked at it. The biscuit was perfectly round, and its golden surface was inlaid with 2 slices of a spirit fruit. But he hadn't eaten it yet. The great sage Acheron had a bad feeling in his heart. He opened his mouth, and a mass of hot air involuntarily rose from his chest. Then it gathered in his mouth and finally spurted out. In the air, it turned into a scarlet fireball. The fireball exploded like a gorgeous firework. It was too beautiful to behold. Perfect technique. However, it was useless. Why hasn't your ability disappeared yet? Bufong was a little surprised. Looking at the great sage Acheron, he asked doubtfully. An hour has passed. Under normal circumstances, your ability should have disappeared. Is it because your ability is too weak, so it prolonged its disappearance? Bufong said, after thinking for a moment. The great sage Acheron's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. Bufong's words gave him a little hope. If it was really like what Bufong had said, then it was not bad. Otherwise, the great sage Acheron, the great sage 9 Revolution, would spit out a fireball when he was fighting against someone. That scene would be extremely awkward. It would be like a street juggler grabbing a wooden stick and spitting it out. Instantly, the fireball on the wooden stick would explode. He was the supreme great sage Acheron of Earth Prison, not a street juggler. Another hour passed by. The great sage Acheron sat on the chair, his face dark. Bufong, on the other hand, was selling pancakes with great enthusiasm. Many people spent nether crystals to buy flatbreads, and they were very happy. Although 150,000 underworld crystals was a lot, those who could afford to buy flatbread were basically little saint-level experts. Therefore, it was not difficult for them to fork out 150,000 underworld crystals. Some of the little saint even ate the flatbread extravagantly to feel the effects of the flatbread. Boom! As the little saint, who wanted to test the efficacy of the flatbread, ate the flatbread, a wisp of fortune energy from the flatbread flowed into his body. The little saint's eyes lit up. In the next moment, 2 pairs of pure white wings appeared on his back. It flapped its wings, and it instantly turned into a stream of light that sliced through the sky. His cultivation base continued to rise. Although it wasn't much, it was enough to make the little saint ecstatic. It seemed like his luck was pretty good. Also, the fortune flatbread could really give people fortune. If he was lucky, he might really become a great sage and turn the tables on Nether Prison, as Onorbu had said. At that time, he might really become famous all over the world. The great sage Acheron glanced at the ecstatic little saint and snorted. His voice boomed like thunder. It exploded in the little saint's ears, causing the little saint to be dumbfounded. "Get out of here! Don't show off in front of me again, or I'll kill you with a finger." The great sage Acheron threatened with a dark face. The little saint quickly flapped the wings on his back and left the shop. Bufong looked over curiously. The great sage Acheron's nostrils flared. He glanced at Bufong, then opened his mouth. Rumble! Another gorgeous fireball shot out and exploded in the air like a gorgeous flower. The great sage Acheron almost fainted when he saw the fireball. It's over. His reputation as the great sage Acheron was ruined by a flatbread. "I can't believe it's a permanent ability. You must be the legendary Chosen One," Bufong said, his eyes wide as he looked at the great sage Acheron. He was really surprised. The system had said that it was very difficult to get a permanent ability from the fortune flatbread. The chance was almost 1 in 10,000. But what happened? The great sage Acheron had gotten a permanent ability on the second flatbread. Although this ability was a little useless, but who cared? His luck was simply heaven-defying. The look of astonishment in Bufong's eyes made the great sage Acheron want to slap him to death. He was a little confused, wondering if he was lucky or unlucky. Glancing at the last flatbread in his hand, the great sage Acheron was a little hesitant. As the chosen one who had gotten a permanent ability after eating the flatbread, he should be very confident in his luck. However, after thinking for a while, the great sage Acheron gave up on eating the last flatbread. Who knew if he activated another permanent ability that could spray water? If so, he could only hide in a corner and cry silently. Bufong entered the kitchen. After a while, he came out again. Once again, he took out a basket of fortune flatbread. The diners who had bought the flatbread left the restaurant one after another, all very excited. The news about the fortune flatbread in the restaurant quickly spread throughout Earth Prison. The fortune flatbread could give the person who ate it an unimaginable fortune. As long as one was lucky enough, one could even temporarily advance from the little saint realm to the great sage realm. As long as one had confidence in himself, a flatbread could help him reach the peak of his life. There was also a 1 in 10,000 chance that he could get a permanent ability. Just like the great sage Acheron, he could get the ability to breathe fire permanently. In less than a day, the news spread throughout the whole Earth Prison. Everyone was dumbfounded the moment they heard the news. Fortune flatbread. What the hell was that? Getting a fortune by luck? Was there such a flatbread? Eating a flatbread was like drawing a lottery. Many people were skeptical at first. However, when a diner pulled out a piece of flatbread in front of the many experts, he took a bite and swallowed it with a loud crack. The little saint instantly turned into a giant more than 5 meters tall, and the energy surrounding his body was extremely strong. The strength of the 7th revolution, little saint also instantly reached the 9th revolution, little saint realm. Everyone was dumbfounded by what they saw. It was much better than the supreme grade Acheron helplessness wine, which could continuously improve the strength of the 2nd revolution. Of course, half an hour later, the little saint returned to his original state, but his aura did not fluctuate or collapse. This once again made everyone's blood boil. This was a kind of enhancement method without any side effects. If everyone had a flatbread, they could bite it and gain a powerful ability when facing a nether prison expert in a great battle, and they could definitely catch the enemy by surprise. As the shop owner said, If one became the great sage by eating the flatbread, wouldn't his name go down in history? In this epic, he would leave behind a thick and colorful stroke. Everyone had a dream of becoming the great sage, and for this dream, they were happy to move forward. For that sliver of opportunity, Therefore, when the news came out, the whole Earth prison was boiling. The aristocratic families rubbed their palms and rushed to Acheron's little store. This time, the sale was even more popular than that of the supreme-grade Acheron helplessness wine. For a moment, the door of the little store was crowded with people. Bufong brought out basket after basket of fortune flatbreads from the kitchen. He was very happy to sell the flatbreads. If it weren't for the fact that each person was limited to 3 flatbreads a day, the roof of Acheron's little store would have been torn off. Those diners were really crazy. Even Jin Jiao and Yin Jiao had come to the store. Hades era, Inglong prison overlord, and Lord Go were nowhere to be found. Nether prison was eyeing them covetously, but it hadn't launched an attack yet. It might be waiting for an opportunity. Therefore, when the remaining prison overlords learned about Bufong's fortune flatbread, they all came to the store. If the flatbread was really that magical, it would definitely become a powerful weapon for Earth prison to fight against Nether prison. Of course, such a sensational news couldn't be kept from Nether prison. The people of Nether prison also learned about it. However, most of them snorted. Fortune flatbread? A flatbread can steal the fortune of heaven and earth? It's ridiculous. Earth prison is trying to relieve the pressure brought to them by our army. That's why they sent out such a ridiculous message to intimidate our army. The people of Earth prison are indeed idiots. They deserve to be trampled by Nether prison in the near future. The auras of Nether prison experts towered into the sky as they stood there. Nether prison's army began to assemble. The armies that had conquered the surrounding small worlds had returned and gathered in the void. The army of the Fire Demon Clan, the Shadow Demon Clan, and the Nether Chef Clan. After conquering the surrounding small worlds, the armies of the 9 clans gathered in the center. Their terrible auras seemed to have turned into monstrous beasts that were about to break through the sky. The sound of war horns tore through the sky and was deafening. Every Nether prison expert's blood boiled at the sound of the horns, and they roared into the sky. Warships sailed across the sky, each manned by an army and guarded by 9 Revolution Little Saint. As the warships sailed past, the oppressive void rumbled as if it could not bear the weight. They brought with them a heavy and oppressive aura. In the sky, there was a stream of light flying past. It floated in midair in an instant. A silver sword flew across the sky, and a gray-robed old man stood on its blade with his hands clasped behind his back. He was none other than the patriarch of the Sword Demon Clan. In the void, there seemed to be a huge shadow, faintly discernible. It was a creature that seemed to be condensed from flames, burning the void, and terrifying heat waves swept out. He was the patriarch of the Fire Demon Clan. The patriarchs of the 6 clans had all appeared. They stood high in the sky, with twisted small worlds over their heads, and the will of the great path hanging down from their bodies. They made them look like real gods, causing the soldiers to tremble. As the patriarchs of the various clans joined the battle, the whole netherworld boiled. Rumble. The void was crushed. Tens of thousands of netherworld soldiers roared in the sky. They came from the distant void, bringing with them a terrible oppressive aura that went straight to Earth prison. Meanwhile, Earth prison, the craze for flatbread had gradually come to an end. The experts who had bought flatbread had returned to their senses. All the aristocratic families and clans sent out their armies to fight against the Nether prison army under the leadership of their experts. Earth prison was very strong, so Nether prison had gathered its armies to fight against the Nether prison army. This was a great show of respect to Earth prison, but it was a disaster for Earth prison. The army of the 9 Nether prison clans was so strong that if the old Hades was still alive, he would not be able to lead Earth prison's army to resist it. But now, the old Hades Tenzang was long gone. How could Earth prison resist it? In the border of Earth prison, hundreds of thousands of soldiers had gathered. Everyone raised their heads and looked at the distant void. There, dark clouds pressed down on the city. Above the black clouds, there were many majestic figures. Their terrifying auras pierced through the sky and the earth. Buzz, an invisible barrier appeared outside the infernal realm. A curtain of light separated the Nether Prison Army and the Earth Prison Army. The war seemed to be on the verge of breaking out. Acheron's little restaurant, the morning sun shone on the earth. Bufong opened the door of the restaurant, and a gust of cold wind blew in. The winter of Earth Prison seemed to be coming. Bufong looked at the deserted door, but his expression didn't change much. The customers who came to buy flatbread never came again. This was a signal. That was the start of the war. Nether Prison's invasion of Earth Prison was a war to defend their homeland. Bufong exhaled softly. He pulled a chair, placed it in front of the restaurant, and lay down on it. The sun shone down, making him feel warm. Squeak. No one knew when Little Who had jumped out of Yu's arms and landed on Bufong's belly. The little guy's lively eyes kept rolling around. The corner of Bufong's mouth twitched as he rubbed the latter's head. With a wave of his hand, an explosive meatball appeared. Little Who's eyes lit up. Grabbing the explosive meatball that Bufong handed over, he stood on Bufong's belly and ate it happily. Holding the explosive meatball in his little paws, his mouth bulged as he ate happily. He was wearing a black dress. Her straight legs were fair and attractive. She stood at the door, behind Bufong's chair. She raised her head and looked into the distance. In her pitch-black eyes, there seemed to be a bright light flowing. Earth Prison was her home. Although she had been banished, no matter what, Earth Prison was still her home. She still cared about the safety of her home. In the distant sky, there seemed to be a black hole expanding. It was a dark haze hanging over it. Suddenly, the chair made a squeaking sound. Bufong stood up from his seat and pushed Little Who was eating the explosive meatball, into Yu's arms. Under Yu's puzzled gaze with his hands clasped behind his back, Bufong strode forward. "Help me look after the store for a while. I'm going to pay off some debts." Bufong's words were directed at Yu. His words still lingered in Yu's ears. His figure had already disappeared in the hazy fog. Yu held Little Who in her arms, watching Bufong's disappearing figure without saying anything. Bufong walked out of the Acheron's restaurant and left the rebuilt Acheron city. He came out of the city. He strode forward as if he could shrink the ground into inches. With his hands clasped behind his back, his vermilion robe and hair fluttered in the wind. When he reached the bank of the Acheron River, he still didn't stop. With one step, he stepped into the Acheron River. He walked on the waves. In the distance, mist lingered on the surface of the river. A small boat was swaying as it approached. A sad flute sound lingered on the river. Chapter 13:30. The Acheron River surged as usual. The crimson river water surged on it, with mournful souls howling and skeletons floating in the air. Bufong clasped his hands behind his back as he walked on the waves. The river breeze blew, making his hair and the sleeves of his vermilion robe flutter. A small boat drifted over from a distance. It was a lonely boat, and the sound of a flute could be heard. An old man wearing a bamboo hat and a straw raincoat sat in the boat, swaying back and forth. Bufong saw the boat from a distance, and the corners of his mouth twitched. With a flip of his hand, a jade jar that was smaller than the fist-sized one belonging to the great sage of the Acheron River fell into his hand. According to the size of this jade jar, it could only hold 3 cups of wine. However, 3 cups of wine were equivalent to 3 million nether crystals, which was a sky-high price. Swoosh! The little boat moved forward, breaking through the flowing water. Suddenly, the sound of the flute stopped. The sole fisherman raised his head, and his old face appeared under the bamboo hat. He seemed to see the thin figure in the distance. The sole fisherman's face twitched. "It's that young man again." The sole fisherman put away the bone flute, his face unsightly. Then he grabbed the bamboo pole and slapped it against the Acheron River. On the surface of the river, the small boat gracefully swung its tail, changed its direction, and headed into the distance, planning to drift away. Obviously, The Soul Fisherman really didn't want to see Bu Fong. The corners of Bu Fong's mouth froze. The scene made him a little dumbfounded and speechless. Why did the Soul Fisherman turn around and run as soon as he saw him? When did he become so frightening? Wait, Bu Fong called out softly. His voice exploded over the Acheron River. When the Soul Fisherman heard that, he was even more startled. His old face twitched even faster. Then he whipped the bamboo pole. Boom! The water in the river surged as if it was about to explode. As for the small boat, it turned into a perfectly straight arrow and shot into the distance. It was extremely fast, riding the wind and breaking the waves. Bu Fong exhaled softly. Then, the vermilion robe on his body underwent a huge change, and a loud and clear vermilion bird cry resounded. A pair of flaming wings appeared on his back, and flaming feathers fluttered in the air. The tip of his foot touched the surface of the river, causing it to explode. Bu Fong's figure turned into a stream of light, rapidly chasing after the Soul Fisherman's small boat. Bu Fong was now a 9-transformation little saint, which was stronger than Soul Fisherman. It would be easy for him to catch up to him. Shortly after, Bu Fong caught up with the Soul Fisherman. Why do you have to chase after me so bitterly? The Soul Fisherman looked at Bu Fong, his face trembling violently as he said bitterly. That young man's cultivation base had improved so fast. He had reached the 9-transformation little saint level. He had met this young man 3 times, and each time, he was greatly surprised. The first time, this young man's cultivation base was still very weak, like an ant in his eyes. But at that time, this young man had a dog with him. The second time, this young man's cultivation base was still not strong, but strangely enough, he was able to fight against him. The third time, this young man had soared into the sky. It was completely beyond his imagination. His strength had surpassed him. How long had it been was this young man going to settle the score with him now? Bam! Bam! The bamboo pole quickly touched the surface of the river, causing it to explode unceasingly. It made the old man's small boat look like a stream of light. In other words, both of them had turned into streams of light, darting across the Acheron River. Boom! After a long time, they entered the wide river. There were no waves on the river. Finally, the small boat stopped moving. The Soul Fisherman sat back on the small boat, as if he had given up resisting. Bu Fong had a strange look on his face. He really didn't understand why this old fellow kept running. This old man's old bones don't want to waste time with you. Today, I didn't bring the flower of helplessness, so it's useless for you to stop me, said the Soul Fisherman. He took off his bamboo hat, revealing his pale hair, each strand of which was curled up. Who told you that I came to you today for the flower of helplessness? Bu Fong glanced at the old man, twitching the corner of his mouth. The Soul Fisherman was taken aback. He looked at Bu Fong, his cloudy eyes filled with shock and uncertainty. Instead of asking for the flower of helplessness, this young man forced him to stop his boat. What was going on? Did he want to kill me? Bu Fong didn't say anything. His hand shook. Instantly, a jar of wine flew out, heading toward the Soul Fisherman. Huh! The Soul Fisherman was stunned. He raised his hand and caught the jar. When I lent you the flower of helplessness, I said I would give you a jar of wine. Today is the time to repay the debt, Bu Fong said. His voice was calm. However, the old man couldn't stay calm. You really just want to give me the wine? The Soul Fisherman was surprised. Bu Fong nodded. The Soul Fisherman's cloudy eyes lit up, and he relaxed. I received your wine. Let me go, said the Soul Fisherman. I received your wine. Let me go. Bu Fong glanced at the Soul Fisherman and didn't say anything. With a flip of his hand, a steaming fortune flatbread flew out. I'll give you another flatbread. Consider it a thank you for the first petal of the flower of helplessness. Bu Fong said. After that, he stepped on the surface of the river, causing it to explode. His figure sped away, turning into a beam of light and disappearing into the hazy mist. The Soul Fisherman's withered hands grabbed the jade jar and the fortune flatbread. As he watched Bu Fong leave, his cloudy eyes glinted. I've been fishing souls on the Acheron River for 10,000 years, and now someone gives me wine. How strange, the The sole fisherman's dry, pale hair fluttered in the wind. A smile came from the bottom of his heart, and he sighed with emotion. Of course, it looked no different from crying. It had been a long time since he smiled from the bottom of his heart. Splash! As Bufong's feet stepped on the river, the water surged up like a bulge, turning into a roaring dragon. As his strength rose to the 9 revolution little saint, Bufong's control of his power became more skillful. He took a step forward. The flaming wings on his back disappeared, and the vermilion robe returned to its striped red and white appearance. Landing on the shore, Bufong clasped his hands behind his back and walked leisurely toward the restaurant. It was late at night. A lonely boat drifted on the Acheron River. The quiet Acheron River was full of fireflies. Black, withered trees grew on the shore, as if they had been struck by lightning. They were char-black. The little boat was anchored. The dim candlelight lit up the boat. The sole fisherman walked out of the boat. He took off his straw raincoat, revealing his skinny body. He sat on the deck of the small boat. A red candle was lit on the side of the boat, and the wax was continuously flowing down from it. The sole fisherman took out a clay jar and slapped the lid open. Immediately, a wailing remnant's soul emerged. A look of disgust appeared in the old man's eyes, but he still brought the clay jar to his mouth. Gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. The sole fisherman drank the juice from the clay jars, which contained the remnant souls. Buzz, the sole fisherman, looked a little pained. His back was hunched, and he couldn't stop shaking. A long time later, the bright moon hung high in the sky. The sole fisherman heaved a sigh of relief. The power of this curse is getting stronger. After fishing souls for 10,000 years, I finally can't suppress it anymore. Sigh. His lordship has fallen. How can I resist fate? I'm just struggling at death's door. The sole fisherman heaved a sigh of relief. His cloudy eyes gazed at the reflection of the bright moon in the sky. The sparkling water made him lose his mind for a moment. His former glory surfaced in his eyes. His former high-spirited self. What a pity. At this moment, he suddenly wanted to drink wine. Drinking wine to drown one's sorrows, even though it would make one more sorrowful, was also a way to relieve one's worries. That was why the sole fisherman thought of the green jade jar. The good wine that mysterious young man had mentioned. A good wine brewed with a flower of helplessness. Young people nowadays really know how to have fun. The sole fisherman sighed. He took out the green jade jar. The jade jar wasn't big, about the size of half a fist. He cursed that young man's stinginess inwardly. The sole fisherman patted the lid of the jade jar. With a thud, the lid was opened. As soon as it was opened, the sole fisherman was stunned, but a thick aroma of wine seemed to turn into a long dragon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, flying out of the jar and meandering in the sky. He took a deep breath. The aroma of the wine went into his body, soaking him in the strong aroma of the wine. This feeling, the sole fisherman's body began to shake. A 7-colored brilliance burst out from the wine jar and illuminated the heavens. It echoed the cold moonlight in the sky. This wine, for the first time, the sole fisherman's eyes showed shock. This wine gave him a sense of déjà vu. Could it be swish? The sole fisherman couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart. He carefully held the green jade jar, and his chapped lips moved closer to the green jade jar. Gulp! Immediately, the sweet wine flowed through his lips and into his mouth. At that moment, it was as if hundreds of flowers were blooming, and everything became clear again. The sole fisherman felt as if he was dozens of years younger in just a flash. With a sip of the wine, he found a feeling of being able to shake the world when he was young. Holding the jar, he gently closed his eyes. The sole fisherman couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart. Turbid tears rolled down from the corners of his eyes. On his body, there was a green brilliance that was constantly swirling, as if it was constantly fighting against the essence in the wine. However, the old man didn't care about that anymore. He seemed to think of something. Hurriedly, he took out a steaming flatbread from the shabby cloth bag hanging on his waist. Even after so long, the steam on the flatbread had not dissipated. He took a bite of the flatbread. As soon as the crispy flatbread entered his mouth, he felt a sense of satisfaction he had never felt before. Buzz, a stream of fresh light poured into the old man's mouth from the flatbread. It was the fortune energy. The fortune energy that belonged to the fortune flatbread. As the fortune energy entered his body, the soul fisherman's turbid eyes brightened. His aura underwent a monstrous change. It was climbing steadily. With a rumble, it broke through the barrier and rushed into the great sage's realm. The old man's wrinkled face had returned to his youthful appearance. He now looked like an inconspicuous middle-aged man. The old man touched his face. He was somewhat dazed. The fortune chi had actually restored him to his youthful appearance and strength. Unfortunately, this state couldn't last long. He could only stay in it for an hour. He seemed to think of something. The old man burst out laughing. His laughter rang out, lingering over the pitch-black Acheron River. The birds perched on the withered branches were alarmed. They flapped their wings and flew away. The body of the soul fisherman, who had become younger, seemed to be glowing. He took out a food box from the cabin. The food box was sealed by array formations. The corners of the soul fisherman's mouth curled upward. It's been too long. It's been so long that I've almost forgotten what his lordship told me to do. Now, the person I've been waiting for has finally arrived. It's time to send this food box out. The soul fisherman laughed and poured all the wine in the jade jar into his mouth. His aura skyrocketed, and the entire Acheron River changed color. Boom! His aura soared to the sky. The yellow spring river suddenly surged with monstrous waves. On the river, the flowers of helplessness were blooming beautifully. With the food box in hand, the soul fisherman stepped on the waves and disappeared in a flash. Acheron Valley, the great sage of Acheron, who was spitting fireballs with a dark face, suddenly frowned and looked in a direction. His eyes were a little surprised. This soul fisherman? That's not right. Why has this old man's aura changed so much? Is he rejuvenated? Forget it. It's none of my business. The great sage of Acheron shook his head and continued to study the fireballs with a dark face. In the dead of night, outside Acheron City, a formidable existence had arrived. His terrifying aura suppressed the void. Above his head, a small world was constantly vanishing. In that small world, everything was broken and destroyed. The soul fisherman stepped on the waves and came. Soon, he stepped into Acheron City. He landed and stopped outside Acheron's restaurant. He was here. The soul fisherman retracted his aura. Looking at Acheron's restaurant, his eyes became nostalgic. He placed the food box on the ground and knocked it 3 times. Then, he looked at the restaurant, not saying a word. In the restaurant, Bu Fong, who was sleeping soundly in his room, suddenly opened his eyes. He sat up on the bed, his pajamas slipping down, revealing his fair chest. His slender arms supported his neck as he looked at the door with a puzzled look. Chapter 1331. At the border of Earth Prison, imprisoned Dragon Pass. 2 armies faced each other, and a terrible aura spread. Earth Prison's defensive barrier floated between heaven and earth like an invisible barrier, isolating everything between heaven and earth. As the largest military city in Earth Prison's border, imprisoned Dragon Pass was magnificent. Its walls stretched for thousands of miles, and on top of them were Earth Prison experts. 2 Earth Prison overlords, Jin Jiao and Yin Jiao, stood on the wall, their black armor glowing coldly. Next to them were the top experts of Earth Prison's various aristocratic families. Most of them were 7 or 8 Revolution Little Saints, and there were also 9 Revolution Little Saint experts standing on top of them. In front of imprisoned Dragon Pass was a vast plain, which had been Earth Prison's battlefield since ancient times. Countless corpses were buried in it. Whether it was in the last age or this age, countless wars, big or small, had broken out. Beneath the battlefield were bones, corpses wrapped in horse leather, and blood flowing like rivers. Outside the barrier, magnificent Nether Prison battleships could be seen. The auras of Nether Prison experts lashed at the barrier like long whips, try to break it. The top experts of Nether Prison had gathered together. Their terrible auras seemed to have turned into a giant demon, which swung a giant hammer. Once it smashed down, there might be a heaven-shaking explosion. Could Earth Prison withstand the attack of these experts? Many people were trembling. They couldn't figure it out. The horn of war had sounded. Once Nether Prison's attack began, rivers of blood would flow. This was a war to defend one's homeland. In the Black Temple, a rumble rang out. Inglong Prison Overlord and Hades Era flew out of it, walking in the air. Their auras were incomparably strong. The pressure of the Great Sage Realm spread out in all directions. The good things in the Black Temple had already been divided up by them. It's time to go. The war has begun. Lord Hades, as the backbone of Earth Prison, you must be present. Inglong Prison Overlord looked at Hades Era and said seriously. Hades Era nodded. He glanced at the Black Palace. What about that lazy dog? Are we not going to wait for him? Hades Era frowned. Inglong took a deep look at the Black Temple. We don't need to worry about the Hellhound's safety. Its power is far beyond our imagination. Inglong said. In the next moment, he grabbed the Void Eye's scepter and bolted in the direction of the imprisoned Dragon Pass. Hades Era hovered in the void, glanced at the Black Temple, and let out a soft sigh. After that, he donned the Hades armor, his red cloak flapping noisily in the wind. Holding the Hades halberd in his hand, he sped across the sky like an arrow, following closely behind Inglong Prison Overlord. In the Black Temple, there was an oppressive aura surging, as if a great terror was boiling within. In front of Akron's restaurant, the much younger soul fisherman looked at the lights in the restaurant, and a smile appeared on his face. Sure enough, the young man in this restaurant had something to do with his lordship. No wonder this young man could break through his cultivation base so fast. Anyone who had something to do with his lordship must be extraordinary. His ears twitched as he heard footsteps coming down the stairs. The soul fisherman laughed, turned around, and left with his hands clasped behind his back. His figure instantly disappeared into the night. However, no one knew where he was headed to. As he walked, the monstrous aura on his body gradually disappeared. The dark green power of the curse, which had been suppressed, once again spread and clung to his body. The soul fisherman turned back into an old man. He staggered, disappearing into the night. Creak! The door of the restaurant was opened. Bufong looked at the wooden food box outside the restaurant, confused. The strange energy fluctuation he had sensed in the restaurant came from this food box. Wrapping his pajamas, Bufong walked out of the restaurant. He picked up the food box and studied it carefully, but he couldn't figure out what it was. Then, he brought it back into the restaurant. With a thud, the door closed. Bufong placed the food box on the table. The lines on the food box were very mysterious. They looked a little old, and there were many traces of wear and tear. Bufong's slender fingers gently tapped on the table, rhythmically. After a long time, Bufong was about to open the food box. However, as soon as his hand touched the seal on the box, it was bounced off. Looking at the seal, Bufong furrowed his brows. This is the confined gourmet array? Bufong couldn't believe it, but when he sensed the familiar energy fluctuation on the lines, he had to believe it. Although the lines of the confined gourmet array were different from Bufong's gourmet array, but the root cause was exactly the same. In other words, this gourmet array also came from the system. Why did this food box appear here? And what was with the array on the food box? What was the dish in the lunchbox? Bufong's eyes narrowed. The confined gourmet array appeared on his palm. To open this array, he had to attack it with the same array. This was the only way to truly break the formation. Crack! Crack! The two arrays collided. After a long time, the energy of the array was worn down. Then the light dimmed. Bufong patted the food box. Instantly, the box opened with a crack. Bufong furrowed his brows. Then he reached out his hand and opened the box. A rich aroma suddenly spread out from the food box. The aroma was vivid and rich. It was like a delicious meal that had just been cooked. Rays of sparkling and translucent light shot out from within, illuminating the entire world. Bufong's eyes were fixed on the dish in the box. It was a pig's trotter, a crystal-like trotter. The meat glistened, looking like a work of art. The aura of the will of the great path emitted from it was shocking. Bufang was shocked by this dish. He reached out his hand, wanted to taste it. However, as soon as his chopsticks touched the pig's trotter, it shattered like a mirror. Bufang's eyes shrank. He retracted his hand as if he had been electrocuted. The dish in the lunchbox slowly crumbled and turned into green smoke, dissipating into the air as if it was just an illusion. Disappeared? Bufang muttered under his breath. Then, the corner of his mouth twitched. With the confined gourmet array, it contained the will of the great path. Without a doubt, this dish was left behind by the previous host. Unfortunately, this dish turned into smoke and dissipated, not allowing him to have good taste. As a chef, tasting delicious food was also a kind of enjoyment. Perhaps the previous host wanted to use this dish to tell me something. But you didn't even let me taste it. I won't believe anything you say. Bufang twitched his mouth. Moreover, Bufang had his own determination. His goal was to become the god of cooking, standing at the top of the food chain in the fantasy world. This goal would be his lifelong goal. No matter how difficult it was, he would not give up. Perhaps the previous host had left this dish behind to tell him that this path might be just like this dish, an illusion that he would never be able to reach. However, did Bufang care? He didn't care. What he cared about was the regret of not being able to taste this dish. Putting away the wooden box, Bufang's mouth twitched as he put it into the system's storage space. As a chef, what he needed to do was to cook good dishes. He didn't need to think too much about other things. Even if he needed to think too much, he would deal with it as it came. Click! The light went out. Bufang returned to his room, lying on his bed. After a while, his breathing became even. The path to becoming the god of cooking was like an unattainable illusion. Without experiencing it himself, how could he know? That night, Bufang had a sweet dream. It was a dream that made the corners of his mouth curl up. Although he was sleeping soundly, his face was still full of nostalgia and happiness. The next day, the morning star jumped out of the horizon. The sunlight shone on the earth, bringing warmth to the land that had been shrouded in cold for the whole night. Bufang woke up early and went to the kitchen. After practicing his knife skills, he began to cook. Sizzle, sizzle. In the kitchen, the fire was soaring. In the black turtle constellation wok, the fire was surging and the ingredients were tumbling. A thick aroma spread out. A pleasant and leisurely day began once again. After practicing cooking, Bufang walked out of the restaurant with a steaming bowl of dragon blood rice. He was wearing a black dress, sitting elegantly in front of the table. Bufang placed the dishes in front of her. He took out a small plate with a few steaming hot explosive meatballs on it. Rubbing Little Hu's head, Bufang opened the door of the restaurant, pulling a chair and sitting at the door. In the distance, dark clouds shrouded, and a terrible pressure swept the world. That was the direction of the battlefield. The wind blew, bringing a faint warmth. Because of the start of the war, there were basically no diners in front of the restaurant. Hence, Bufang's mind flickered, entering the heaven and earth farmland. He was ready to study the new gourmet array time. Yesterday, when he saw the gourmet array on the food box, Bufang realized that perhaps the gourmet array's function was far more than that. The previous host's use of the gourmet array might be different from his. Perhaps the previous host didn't study any death food tool. However, they had studied other ways to use it. For example, using the imprisoned array as a seal, and so on. Outside the imprisoned dragon pass, the nether prison experts hovered in midair. Stepping on a sword, Sword Demon Patriarch stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes indifferent and cold. However, there was a surging killing intent in the depths of his eyes. Fire Demon Patriarch was faintly discernible in the void, and his laughter kept spreading out. Shadow Demon Patriarch, Beastmaster Patriarch, and the other peak experts of the 9 clans had all arrived. Sword Demon Patriarch glanced at his old friends, and his eyes narrowed. That man's inheritor is in Earth Prison, so this time we must break into Earth Prison and completely obliterate that man's inheritor. If Di Ting, Nether Hao, and the others were here, they would definitely do the same. He, he, he. That man's inheritor? Fire Demon Patriarch's eyes were red, and his body was like a burning flame as he sneered. The next moment, a shrill cry exploded in the void. Of course he must die. Fire Demon Patriarch's aura sword, and it was so oppressive that it made it hard for people to breathe. That man has an inheritor. If he is allowed to grow, he will be a great threat. We must kill him while he's still a threat. A gloomy old man said. In his sleeve, there was a pitch-black snake slithering around with its tongue spitting out. In the sky, one nether prison warship after another was aimed at Earth Prison's defensive barrier. The next moment, terrible energy surged out of the warships. Boom! Boom! The battleship was being bombarded with the power of a great sage attack, and it kept on slamming into the defensive barrier. They wanted to break the barrier. In Earth Prison, every expert tensed up. When the barrier broke, the war would begin. Buzz, Sword Demon Patriarch's eyes were cold. Behind him, a silver sword thrust into the sky. The cry of a sword rang through the void. Without Hades' Tenzing, what is there to resist? Surrender obediently. The unification of the great netherworld cannot be stopped. Boom! In the sky, a sword light bloomed. The next moment, a terrible sword intent slashed toward the barrier. A loud rumble rang out, and a brilliant light illuminated heaven and earth. At this moment, the whole Earth Prison seemed to see the blazing light in the sky. Under the sword strike of a 9-revolution great sage, the surface of the barrier was instantly covered with densely packed vein patterns. The defensive barrier left by Nether King Tian Song was finally broken. Chapter 1332. A beam of sword light came from the sky. It slashed on Earth Prison's barrier, instantly covering it with numerous fine cracks. As the cracks spread, the barrier collapsed in an instant. The experts of Earth Prison and imprisoned Dragon Pass trembled, feeling a little cold. Looking up, they saw the Hell Rampart crumbling into countless crystalline fragments that rained down from the sky. It was like an icy rain had just fallen, and their hearts were chilled to the bone, and they felt a chill spreading out from the soles of their feet. In front of imprisoned Dragon Pass, on a vast battlefield that was thousands of miles wide, a sandstorm rose, sending sand and stones flying. In the sky, as Earth Prison's barrier slowly disappeared, the surging auras of the Nether Prison experts finally emerged completely. Warships gushed with energy, waiting to launch the most powerful attack, wanting to obliterate Earth Prison in an instant. Every Nether Prison battleship had experts standing on it. They were all clad in armor and looked majestic. They were the vanguard of each warship. Thump, thump, thump. Inside the Nether Prison warships, the sound of war drums rang out. A shirtless burly man held huge drumsticks with both hands, beating the huge bronze drum placed on the warship. Every time he struck the drum, it seemed as if the drum would tremble. The drum was deafening, making people feel their spirit, energy, and spirit boil. This was the effect of the war drums. The eyes of the vanguard standing on the prow of the warships immediately lit up, and their auras surged. Roar! Battle cries rang out. The vanguard of each warship leaped out. A terrible aura soared into the sky, turning into a beam of light as it fell from the warship. Boom! 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 Loud booms rang out. Every vanguard fell to the ground, and the ground suddenly collapsed and sunk in. Cracks continued to spread. On the wall of imprisoned Dragon Pass, the experts from Hell tensed up as well. Facing the Nether Prison vanguard, they naturally couldn't easily admit defeat. Prison Overlord Luo Ji's pink hair fluttered in the wind. She wore black armor, which vividly displayed her exquisite figure. A little yellow flag appeared in her hand. He suddenly waved the little yellow flag, and the netherworld aura entered it. This caused the little yellow flag to rise into the air and float in the air. Thousands of streams of light flickered within it. It was as if rays of light were dispersing. As the little yellow flag roared, outside imprisoned Dragon Pass, The battlefield that spanned thousands of miles suddenly rumbled. Beneath the ground, a dazzling array formation light surged into the sky. Buzz, the nether prison vanguards immediately rushed into the array like savage beasts. Boom! A rumbling sound rang out. These nether prison vanguards were not weak. They were all 5th or 6th revolution experts of the Little Saint. He charged into the formation and immediately collided with it, clashing head-on with it. In the sky, the beating of nether prison's war drums grew more and more intense. The drumbeats were rapid, and they fell like a storm. Dong, dong, dong. Every beat of the drum seemed to be pounding on his mind. Bang! Some of the vanguards were crushed to pieces by the formation. There were also those who charged forward who forcefully withstood the impact of the formation, wanting to break through it. The roars and roars of indignation resounded in the sky continuously. Jin Jiao raised one foot, stepping on the wall. His eyes gazed at the vanguards in the formation below. His muscles were trembling with excitement. When Hades Tenzang led the Earth Prison army to attack Nether Prison, he did not participate in that great battle. It was a regret in his heart. In that battle, there were peerless experts such as Hades Tenzang, Earth Prison Dog, and so on. However, he did not see any of them. However, this time, he would not be absent from the great battle. Boom! A vanguard covered in blood rushed out of the array that spanned thousands of miles of the battlefield. Holding a long spear, he headed straight for imprisoned Dragon Pass. Jin Jiao roared. Grabbing a black, iron-long knife, he stepped on the wall, and his figure instantly flew down. Nether Prison, evil beast. Die. Boom! Jin Jiao roared, and a terrifying aura instantly burst out. Holding the long knife with both hands, he descended from the sky, landing on the ground. His feet stepped on the solid ground, facing the Nether Prison vanguard, whose eyes were red. A knife slashed out. The knife light swept over, speeding past. In an instant, it cut the vanguard into 2 halves. Blood mist suddenly filled the air. In the sky, the vanguard had broken through the formation. The warships roared. On them, figures jumped down one after another, landing on the ground. Their battle cries shook the sky. In an instant, countless Nether Prison experts rushed into the formation. On the city wall of imprisoned dragon, Pass Luo Ji's face suddenly paled. The little yellow flag's radiance dimmed as it was torn apart. The Nether Prison's army rushed into the formation. It was as if a cavalry had trampled on the formation, causing it to collapse. This was the first wave of Nether Prison's attack. The attackers were experts under the Little Saint realm from the 9 clans of Nether Prison. They were also the main force of this war. After Jin Jiao killed the Nether Prison vanguard with one slash, his eyes were bright. Grabbing the corpse ghost soul sealing fan on his back, he shook his hand, and the fan soared in the wind. In an instant, it turned into a huge iron fan that was several meters tall. Jin Jiao stared at the army that was charging over. His terrifying, murderous intent seemed to turn into a giant, multicolored beast in the sky above the army. Jin Jiao's eyes turned red. Roaring, he grabbed the iron fan and swung it down. Boom! A tornado rose, turning into a long dragon, rolling toward the battlefield. Puff! Puff! Like a white steed crossing a crevice. Wherever the tornado passed, experts were sucked in, howling miserably. Inside the Nether Prison warship, a 9 revolution Little Saint stepped out, hovering in the air, facing the huge tornado. He reached out his hand, curling and opening his palm. Then, the soil on the ground flew up and climbed onto the tornado, wrapping the entire tornado up. Soon, a mud dragon appeared on the battlefield. The Nether Prison 9 revolution, Little Saint finally made his move. Creak! The gate of imprisoned Dragon Pass opened. Behind the gate, the waiting army roared and charged out, brandishing their spears and swords as they approached the Nether Prison army. Dong! 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 Of course, the war drums couldn't be left out. Above the imprisoned Dragon Pass, Luo Ji's face was pale. 8 war drums emerged around her, dancing like a fairy. Every time she beat the drums, a heart-stirring sound bloomed. The bugles of charging rang out, complementing the beating of the war drums. The army charged. Battle cries shook the sky. On the battlefield that spanned thousands of miles, the two armies charged at each other from two different sides of the battlefield. Like two collapsed dams, the river water poured down. At the same time, the waves soared to the sky, crashing into each other. Boom! The moment the two armies clashed, the sky turned dark. It was like the sky was falling and the earth was splitting. The sun and moon lost their light. The battle broke out instantly. Boom! 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 Every expert's aura burst out. They used all kinds of means, constantly bombarding and fighting with the enemy. The cruel war showed its terror in just a blink of an eye. Some nether prison experts had their bodies blown up, while some earth prison experts had their limbs cut off, blood splashed, and the miserable scene filled the world in an instant. However, the battle between the two armies was in a stalemate. In the sky, in the void, a pale-faced old man with black snakes wriggling in his sleeves could be seen. "It's time for the experts of my Beastmaster clan to move out," the old man said lightly. The next moment, in a warship one after another, nether prison experts clad in cloaks rushed out. These experts were all Little Saint Realm experts. After rushing out of the warship, they leaped down from the sky. Dozens of figures, each with a cold face, descended from the sky. As they descended from the sky and neared the ground, they crushed the jade talismans. Deafening bestial roars rang out, and one terrible savage beast after another appeared under them. Boom! They smashed into the ground, causing it to collapse. These Beastmaster clan experts rode savage beasts and charged over like monstrous waves. As soon as they entered the battlefield, it was as if there was no one there. The Earth Prison experts were no match for them at all. They were smashed into minced meat by the savage beast's claws, and the experts on the savage beasts pierced their heads with spears. At this moment, the bloody war was vividly displayed. Clad in armor, Yin Jiao stood on the city wall, watching the savage beasts of the Beastmaster clan enter the battlefield. His cynical face suddenly turned serious. He raised his hand and slapped it hard on the city wall. Immediately, ripples spread across the entire wall. Buzz, deep black holes appeared on the city walls. Fallen god puppet. Shoot! Yin Jiao stood on the wall, his silver horn reflecting light. As his voice faded, mysterious fluctuations suddenly appeared in the black holes on the city walls. Buzz, the next moment, a whistling sound rang out. It was as if the void was being torn apart and kept collapsing. Huge black crossbow bolts shot out of the black holes on the wall. Their targets were the nether prison's savage beasts. Boom! The savage beasts slapped the ground with their claws and raised their bodies. However, the fallen god puppet arrived in the blink of an eye. It pierced through the beast's chest and pierced through the beast tamer on its back, causing blood to spray out like a river. With a loud boom, the giant beast fell to the ground and slid far away. Fallen god puppets flew over one after another. All of them pierced through the savage beasts of the Beastmaster clan, who were displaying their divine might as if they were invincible. How dare you! In the nether prison warship, seeing this scene, the 9 Revolution Little Saint of the Beastmaster clan flew into a rage. He slapped the table and rose to his feet, rushing over. Above the Earth prison's imprisoning dragon pass, a top 9 Revolution Little Saint of an aristocratic family was enraged, raising his finger and cursing. At the same time, the 9 Revolution Little Saint also rushed out and began to fight. The collision happened instantly. The collision between the 9 Revolution Little Saint level was not something to be underestimated. In an instant, the battle reached its climax. Armies collided with armies. Techniques collided with techniques. At this moment, it was a battle between top experts. The war between Nether Prison and Earth Prison broke out in an instant. Rumble. In the sky, the experts with the Great Sage could no longer sit still. The Nether Prison's 1 Revolution Great Sage made a move. When the Great Sage made his move, the pressure instantly changed. The terrible will of the Great Path rolled in the sky. making the Earth prison experts on the battlefield nervous. The hearts of the experts on the imprisoned Dragon Pass sank. What they were most worried about had happened. The Nether Prison's Great Sage had made his move, and the Earth Prison's Great Sage was much weaker than him. If the Great Sage crushed his opponent, Earth Prison would be finished. Some of the experts from the aristocratic families turned pale. Some of them gritted their teeth and took out several steaming fortune flatbreads, ready to fight to the death. However, an explosion suddenly rang out in the sky. Two figures descended from the sky in a flash. Do you really think Earth Prison is invincible? A thunderous roar rang out. Clad in his Hades armor, Hades' era stepped through the air. Over the black Hades armor, towering nether energy soared into the sky as if it had turned into a roaring dragon. He waved the Hades halberd and swept it across the sky. At this moment, Hades' era was like a god descending to the mortal world. In the sky, he swept the halberd out. The light from the halberd turned into a crescent arc and swept across, knocking back the Nether Prison's Great Sage. Hades' era's small world emerged. A magnificent world was reflected in the sky, and the will of the Great Path surged in it. It completely crushed the Great Sage's will of the Great Path. Boom! The Nether Prison's little saint flew backward, coughing up blood. Clad in armor, Hades' era's eyes were cold as he held the halberd, and his momentum was overwhelming. He raised his head and faced the warships hovering in the sky, looking extremely domineering. He raised the halberd and pointed it at the enemy. Sword Demon Patriarch was indifferent. Stepping on a silver sword, he looked into the distance at imprisoned Dragon Pass as if he was prying at something. The great sage of Second Revolution and below must kill that guy for me. Sword Demon Patriarch said lightly. His voice spread out and resounded through the sky. The next moment, inside the warship, 8 figures stepped into the air. 8 great sages attacked at the same time. Their auras were linked together, as if they had turned into a huge wave. Hades' era narrowed his eyes. The difference between Earth Prison and Nether Prison was the number of great sages. The other side had 8 Second Revolution and 1 First Revolution great sage. On Earth Prison's side, only Hades' era was a great sage. On the wall, the little saints of the aristocratic families exchanged glances and gritted their teeth. Then, many of them took out steaming fortune flatbreads. A crisp crunching sound rang out. Each of them took a bite of the flatbread. A stream of fortune flowed into their hearts. After eating the fortune flatbread, the auras of the 9 Revolution little saints changed. Rumble. In Acheron's little store, Bufong narrowed his eyes and curled up in a chair. A cold wind was blowing, and the whole sky of Earth Prison was enveloped in darkness. Yu was holding Little Hu in her arms, looking a little restless. Suddenly, Little Hu jumped out of Yu's arms and into Bufong's arms. Bufong opened his sleepy eyes and looked over in confusion. Then, he saw Yu looking at him with a wronged expression. Bufong twitched the corner of his mouth. If you want to go, just go. Bufong looked at Yu. He knew what she wanted, so he said lightly. Yu's black eyes flashed. Then, the Netherworld ship broke through the void. Yu glanced at Bufong, then jumped into the Netherworld ship. Sitting cross-legged on the ship's bow, her long hair fluttered in the wind, and her beautiful face had a hint of indifference. After all, Earth Prison was the Netherworld woman's home. She was also duty-bound to protect her home. Rumble. Bufong slowly stood up from the chair, stroking Foxy's soft fur as he watched the Netherworld ship soar through the sky. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then, Bufong turned and went into the kitchen. He took out a clay pot and a dried pot. Chapter 1333. Naturally, the great sage could not choose to fight on the ground. Otherwise, as the aftermath of the battle spread, all the warriors fighting on the battlefield would be crushed to death. So, Hades' era rushed into the sky with the Hades halberd in his hand, broke through the clouds, and rushed into the battlefield of the stars. The battlefield of the stars was a battlefield that belonged to the great sage. Here, Experts at the level of the Great Sage could unleash their supreme power without fear of affecting everything on the ground. Boom! In the battlefield of the stars, one figure after another chased after him. Clad in the Hades armor, Hades' cloak flapped noisily behind him. Holding the Hades halberd, he hovered in the battlefield of the stars. Around him, 8 great sage experts, who were in the first and second revolution, surrounded him. The aura of these great sage experts almost shook heaven and earth, putting tremendous pressure on Hades' era. The 8 great sage experts surrounded him, which was also a test for him. After all, he was only one person. 8 great sages could gang up on him and beat him to death. Boom! His sharp eyes swept across the sky. Hades' era was very calm. Compared with Nether Prison, Earth Prison was at a disadvantage in terms of the number of great sage experts. Nether Prison's great sage completely crushed Earth Prison in terms of the number of great sage experts. Therefore, if Earth Prison wanted to win this war, it had to fight against several great sage experts at once. Otherwise, once the other great sage experts were free, it would be a disaster for Earth Prison. Therefore, Hades' era had to stop the 8 great sage experts in front of him. He breathed a soft sigh of relief. Hades' era's eyes suddenly became sharp. Hades swept out his halberd, streaking through the air in a circular arc, and rushed out in all directions. The great sage of Nether Prison stared coldly at him and attacked in a flash. In the battlefield of the stars, a fierce battle broke out. Hades' era fought against 8 experts at once. In imprisoned Dragon Pass on the city wall, many 9 revolution little saints of the aristocratic families took a bite of the fortune flatbread. Speaking of which, this biscuit was quite strange. It actually paid particular attention to luck, using luck to obtain good fortune. This kind of situation was very rare. Kacha kacha. The crisp sound resounded throughout the walls of the entire imprisoned Dragon Pass. On the Nether Prison side, many experts gazed into the distance and saw the scene on the imprisoned Dragon Pass clearly. However, it was precisely because he could see it clearly that he was dumbfounded. Because he discovered that those experts were actually eating flatbread. Eat pancakes? It's such a serious battle. And you're eating biscuits? Many Nether Prison experts looked at each other, puzzled. If Earth Prison's people are all so stupid, then they deserve to be destroyed by our Nether Prison. A Nether Prison expert sighed with emotion. Suddenly, above the walls of the imprisoned Dragon Pass, waves of terrifying chi soared into the sky. As the auras of these experts who had eaten the flatbread suddenly changed. A mouthful of fortune gas had transformed them. The head of a 9 revolution little saint family had his hair stand up like steel needles, but his aura was several times stronger than before. He took a step forward and vanished into the void like a ghost. This 9 revolution little saint actually obtained the speed of the extreme realm. Even an ordinary great sage would not dare to underestimate such speed. A loud laugh rang out. Then, this expert from aristocratic family charged into the battlefield in front of him. He was so fast that he moved like a ghost. As soon as he entered the battlefield, no one could stop him. In the blink of an eye, he had stalled 2 9 revolution little saint and even seriously injured one. Boom! The little saint of the fire demon clan struck. Monstrous flames destroyed everything as he pressed toward the battlefield. Meanwhile, on the imprisoned Dragon Pass, an expert obtained the fortune of the water element. He was surrounded by monstrous water currents, as if he had turned into a water demon. His comprehension of the water element had reached the extreme. Rumble. A water dragon rushed out and immediately pressed the little saint of the fire demon clan to the ground. Ha ha! I'm very lucky. An expert with fluttering long hair laughed. His aura rose steadily, and suddenly he broke through the shackles of the 9 revolution little saint and stepped into the 2 revolution great sage realm. A terrible aura suppressed the whole battlefield. This expert, who had broken through and become a great sage, immediately soared into the sky and joined the battlefield of the stars to help Hades' era. With the addition of this great sage, Hades' era was a little confused. He never knew that there was such a great sage in Earth Prison. The Nether Prison camp was already dumbfounded. Looking at the Nether Prison experts who seemed to be on steroids, they were a little stunned. However, what made them feel better was that Nether Prison still had the upper hand on the battlefield. After all, the foundation of Nether Prison experts was stronger than that of Earth Prison. As long as they persisted, Earth Prison would be completely defeated. Suddenly, the Nether Prison commanders and the warships widened their eyes. They looked incredulously at the battlefield, which had been turned around in an instant. All of them were completely stunned. On the battlefield, the Earth Prison little saints who were fighting each other had all pulled away from their enemies. Each and every one of them took out a piece of piping hot flatbread from their hands, eating flatbread in the middle of the battle. "Are you looking down on Nether Prison?" A Nether Prison expert roared as if he had been insulted. He was furious. "No, I'm just eating a flatbread to calm down," the Earth Prison expert answered. After eating the flatbread, the fortune gas entered his mouth. The Nether Prison expert was so lucky that his cultivation base rose several levels in an instant. He crushed the Nether Prison expert and stabbed him to death with a knife. This kind of scene kept happening on the battlefield. Those experts who had eaten the flatbread, whether or not, had all improved by quite a bit. Some people's cultivation base was rising like a madman. Some of the 9 Revolution Little Saint had even broken through to the Great Sage realm. This F** king, Nether Prison's original advantage had suddenly turned into a great disadvantage. It wasn't just Nether Prison. Even many people in Earth Prison were dumbfounded. Hovering in midair, Inglong Prison Overlord was puzzled as he watched the Earth Prison experts eat the flatbread and grow stronger. What kind of spirit pill was this flatbread? It could make the Little Saint's cultivation base soar in an instant and give him a chance to step into the Great Sage realm. However, Inglong Prison Overlord didn't have time to wonder, because the Nether Prison camp's Great Sage, who was even stronger, had made his move. He was going to crush the Earth Prison camp with a number of Great Sage realm experts. Nether Prison evil beasts, don't be so arrogant. Inglong Prison Overlord's eyes were bright. He smashed the hollow staff down, causing the void to tremble and powerful waves to spread. Inglong Prison Overlord strode down, pulled the Nether Prison's 5 Revolution Great Sage Realm experts into the battlefield of the stars, and the battle began. However, with Inglong Prison's cultivation base, he naturally crushed the Great Sage Realm expert. The Nether Prison camp, on the other hand, was unwilling to give up. 2 more Great Sage Realm experts soared into the sky, one 7th Revolution and the other 6th Revolution. They were already the strongest experts under the Great Sage Realm experts. The rest were the Nether Prison's 9 Revolution Great Sage Realm experts, who were the Patriarchs. However, those Patriarchs seemed to be waiting for something. Hovering in midair, they looked down at the battlefield with expressionless faces. Rumbling filled the battlefield of the stars. Terrible wills of the Great Path collided with each other and kept crushing each other. With the Hades halberd and Hades armor, Hades' era's strength had increased a lot. He managed to seriously injure several Nether Prison Great Sage Realm experts. With the help of the Great Sage Realm expert, who had never seen Earth Prison, he won. The 8 Nether Prison Great Sage Realm experts who had besieged Hades' era realm experts were seriously injured and fled. One of them was even pierced by Hades' era's halberd and lifted up. The remaining 7 fled the battlefield of the stars. Hades' era, who had passed the Demon King Pass, was extremely domineering. Boom, boom. On the battlefield, all the experts raised their heads. They looked up at the sky. There, a figure in black armor, with a red cloak fluttering behind him, held the Hades halberd in one hand, and a Nether Prison 1st Revolution Great Sage Realm expert was hanging on the halberd. The Great Sage's blood kept dripping from the tip of the halberd and falling on the battlefield like boulders. It was a shocking scene. All the Nether Prison experts were terrified. The Earth Prison experts, on the other hand, roared and cheered excitedly. Lord Nether King's victory was like a shot of adrenaline for them. This caused their fighting spirit to surge. Kill! Earth Prison's momentum soared. It suppressed many Nether Prison experts and made them shiver. With the help of the Fortune Flatbread, they fought back and forced the Nether Prison experts back hundreds of miles. Countless Nether Prison experts died, tragically on the spot. My big brother Era is so handsome. On the wall, Luo Ji's face was pale, and her eyes were shining like stars. Looking at Hades' Era, who had killed a First Revolution Great Sage Realm expert like a god, she fell in love instantly. Yuji's eyes were shining as she stared at him. However, soon, Yuji's pupils constricted, because she realized the real top experts of the Nether Prison camp had made a move. The 6 experts, who had never made a move and seemed to be guarding the void, had finally made their move. The 6 supreme existences were the real reliance of Nether Prison. Once they made their move, it would be the beginning of Earth Prison's nightmare. An eerie laugh resounded across the sky and lingered in everyone's ears. The next moment, a fireball that looked like a scorching sun flew out of the void. Scorching heat, accompanied by a monstrous pressure, filled the whole area. The pressure made everyone feel as if they were suffocating and couldn't breathe. This is the Fire Demon Patriarch. An expert from the Earth Prison camp said bitterly. The Fire Demon Patriarch was the top great sage of the 9 Nether Prison clans. Each of them was the top fighting force in the Netherworld. Once such an expert made a move, the Fortune Flatbread could not help improve his strength. Earth Prison, was he really going to lose? Hades' Era looked at the terrible existence that was descending like the scorching sun. Under the scorching sun, he was as small as an ant. The Nether King halberd flicked out, and the body of the Nether Prison Great Saint exploded in an instant. With a ripping sound, he turned into a mist of blood. Hades' Era pointed the halberd at the Fire Demon Patriarch. The Fire Demon Patriarch's cold voice rang out. "You're overestimating yourself. If it were your father, Hades Tenzang, I might have to retreat a little. As for you, you're just an ant." Amidst the flames, a figure shrouded in flames emerged. The flames had turned into beard and hair. He looked very old, but his aura was as hot as the sun. Rumble! A flaming whisker swept over fiercely. Hades' Era let out a long roar. The Hell King halberd swept horizontally, slashing out a few streaks of light that bombarded the barrier. Only then did he manage to scatter the flame whisker. However, even so, white steam rose from Nether King Erha's body. This Fire Demon Patriarch gave him much more pressure than the Black Demon of the Black Temple. After all, Black Demon's hand was suppressed by the power of the law, and he had less than 1/10 of his strength. Even so, it was difficult for him to deal with Black Demon, even if he joined forces with Long. Now, this Fire Demon Patriarch was a powerful 9 Revolution Great Sage. There was no way he could stop him. At the critical moment, "Where's that mangy dog?" Hades' Era gritted his teeth, sweat trickling down his forehead. With the mangy dog gone, no one in Earth Prison could stop the patriarchs of the 9 clans. The void in the distance was suddenly torn apart. A Netherworld ship swayed as it flew out of it. The Netherworld ship floated above imprisoned Dragon Pass. You sat at the bow. When she saw you, her pupils constricted. "Why are you here? It's so dangerous here." Yuji's face turned unsightly when she saw you. "I've come to help you," you said, looking at her. Of course, Yu's appearance didn't attract too much attention. At this moment, everyone's attention was focused on Fire Demon Patriarch and Hades' Era in the void. This battle would determine the overall situation of the war. Fire Demon Patriarch was too lazy to enter the battlefield of the stars. After all, there was no need to enter the battlefield to deal with a Second Revolution Great Sage. With his strength, he could directly obliterate him. Boom! All of a sudden, Fire Demon Patriarch's scarlet eyes narrowed. The next moment, he turned his hand and threw a palm at Hades' Era. This palm seemed to have gathered the origin of all the flames between heaven and earth, burning fiercely and twisting the void. It slapped toward Hades' Era. Almost in a flash, it sealed all the space around Hades' Era, making it impossible for him to escape. Under this palm, there was the intent to kill. Without Hades' Tenzang, your earth prison is just making a meaningless resistance. Fire Demon Patriarch's voice resounded through the sky. Under this palm, even Hades' era felt a little despair. In the imprisoned Dragon Pass, everyone's faces were pale and their bodies were shaking. Once Hades' era died in battle, it'd be a major blow to Earth Prison's morale. You raised her head and frowned slightly. The giant flaming palm kept approaching. Suddenly, in the distance, a burst of laughter rang out. The voice exploded in the air. Everyone jerked their heads around to look. You Fireball, are you an idiot? Do you think I don't exist? Do you know that I've watched Hades' Tenzang grow up? Roar. A dragon roar rang out. In the distant sky, a huge, blood-colored, illuminating dragon flapped its wings and flew over. Above the illuminating dragon's head, two figures stood. One was the great sage Acheron, who was holding a jade wine jar in one hand. The other was a slightly thin figure. In the face of the flaming palm that was almost approaching Hades' era, the great sage Acheron flicked his finger, and a stream of Acheron water fell from the sky. All of a sudden, it crashed into the giant flaming palm. Chapter 1334. A stream of blood-colored water fell from the sky and collided with the giant flaming palm. This was not just a simple collision of energy, but also a brief confrontation between the will of the great path. Sizzle, sizzle. The river water and the flames entangled, bursting out with a monstrous aura. Terrible energy kept rumbling and exploding. The next moment, in front of everyone's horrified eyes, the flames and the river water blended and disappeared, turning into steam that filled the sky. Whoosh! The huge blood-illuminating dragon flapped its wings and landed on the warship. A terrible rumble rang out. The majestic pressure of the blood-illuminating dragon scared the people around it into silence. This huge blood-illuminating dragon was also a being in the Great Sage realm, and its strength was very terrifying. On its head, in addition to Great Sage Acheron, there was also a thin figure. The figure was none other than Bufong. Bufong sat on it with a calm face, his vermilion robe fluttering lightly in the wind. I'll leave the rest to you. Bufong glanced at Great Sage Acheron and said. Great Sage Acheron waved his hand. Bufong thought for a moment. Then, two flatbreads appeared in his hand, and he handed them to Great Sage Acheron. Great Sage Acheron refused at first when he saw the flatbreads. When he thought of the fireballs he had to spit out day and night, he felt very sad. Take it. A person's luck can't always be like this. Bufong comforted him after thinking for a moment. Great Sage Acheron thought about it and agreed. Could his luck be worse? So, he took the flatbreads from Bufong. Fire Demon Patriarch naturally saw the flatbreads Bufong handed to Great Sage Acheron. The flames in her eyes burned fiercely. You should be the inheritor of that person that Sword Geezer mentioned. Indeed, only the inheritor of that person can cook this kind of flatbread. The Fire Demon Patriarch stared at Bufong with a hint of playfulness in his eyes. Bufong, on the other hand, was very calm as he glanced at Fire Demon Patriarch. Then, he took a step forward. He walked out of the Torch Dragon's back and landed on the walls of the imprisoned Dragon Pass. Yu's dark eyes stared at Bufong. Bufong, why are you here? You looked at Bufong and asked. Business isn't good, and it's boring to stay in a restaurant. So I came out for a stroll. Bufong folded his hands behind his back and answered expressionlessly. After hearing that, Yu didn't ask anything else, as if she had tacitly agreed with Bufong's answer. Yuchi was also somewhat speechless. What did it mean to be bored and come to the battlefield for a stroll? Was the battlefield a place to play? If one was not careful, one could die here. Yuchi really had a headache for Bufong. I can't believe he asked you to come to such a dangerous place. Although Yu's cultivation base has broken through and you've become stronger than your sister, you're still on this battlefield. Once the Great Sage discovers Yu's secret, it will definitely be a disaster. He seemed to see the anxiety in Yu Chi's eyes. Bufang twitched the corner of his mouth and said faintly, "Don't worry, it's okay. I'm here." In the sky, the patriarch of the fire demon clan let out a shrill laugh. His body turned into a ball of fire and sped toward Great Sage Acheron. Yellow Spring Great Sage didn't retreat. Instead, he launched a counterattack. Instead, he threw out a backhand attack, forcing the fire demon patriarch to take several steps back. Great Sage Acheron's cultivation base was indeed strong, and he wasn't afraid of fire demon patriarch at all. A bestial roar rang out. In the distance, on a nether prison warship, the old man, who was playing with a long black snake in his hand, stepped out. He snapped his fingers. Even the void seemed to tremble. "Little baby, come out and get some fresh air." The corner of Beastmaster Patriarch's mouth twitched. The next moment, he snapped his fingers, and the array rumbled. The array suddenly emerged in the void, and a behemoth was about to crawl out of it. Squeak! A black shadow suddenly emerged in the array. It was so huge that it blotted out the sky. It was actually a gigantic pitch-black bat. The bat emerged and spread its wings, which stretched as far as the eye could see. As its wings flapped, it turned into a stream of light and swooped toward Great Sage Acheron. Great Sage Acheron clasped his index finger and thumb together and blew into his mouth. The blood-illuminating dragon, who had almost fallen asleep, widened its eyes, flapped its wings, soared into the sky, and swatted the huge bat down. Boom! 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 The two behemoths wrestled with each other on the ground. Beastmaster Patriarch and Fire Demon Patriarch attacked at the same time, forcing Great Sage Acheron into the battlefield of the stars. Great Sage Acheron was a veteran Great Sage of Earth Prison, and he was very strong. Although he did not follow Hades' Tenzang to attack Earth Prison, the experts of Earth Prison knew him very well. After all, he was a 9-revolution Great Sage. How could they not know him well? Boom! The three Great Sages killed their way into the battlefield of the stars. In a flash, their auras completely enveloped the battlefield. Inglong, Earth Prison Overlord, and the others were forced to a corner. Great Sage Acheron looked imposing. In his hand, he held a jade wine jar. After carefully putting it away, Great Sage Acheron looked at the two people opposite him, Fire Demon Patriarch and Beastmaster Patriarch. They were the two most famous experts of the 9 clans. Among the 9 patriarchs, their strength was at the 9-revolution Great Sage level. Of course, there were strong and weak Great Sages among the 9-revolution Great Sage. If D Ting and the Nether Puppeteer clan's patriarch appeared, Great Sage Acheron did not dare to say that he could fight them alone. However, if it was Fire Demon Patriarch and Beastmaster Patriarch, Great Sage Acheron still dared to fight them. Boom! 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 With a thought, an Acheron river surged above Great Sage Acheron's head, as though it had turned real. Suddenly, it rushed forward. A great battle broke out in an instant. On the battlefield, when the Great Sage moved to the battlefield of the stars, the haze that shrouded everyone's hearts completely dissipated. The stench of blood spread across the battlefield. Bufang stood on the wall of imprisoned Dragon Pass, looking down at the murderous battle below. His face grew slightly serious. "Owner Bu, have you brought any fortune flatbreads to sell?" Suddenly, just as Bufang was in a daze, a little saint expert from an aristocratic family suddenly appeared and said to Bufang. Bufang was taken aback. "With the fortune flatbreads, even the smallest fortune can enhance our strength. When such a small amount of power converges into a river, it will be very huge. Perhaps it can help us win this battle." This little saint expert was obviously a beneficiary of the fortune flatbreads. Looking at his excited look, Bufang couldn't help but click his tongue. However, Bufang's mind flickered. Each person could only buy 3 fortune flatbreads a day, but today was a new day. He could sell them again. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. After arguing with the system in his mind, he finally asked the system to move the charcoal oven here. "I can sell them. Give me time to make the flatbreads. Stay calm. Don't be reckless. Bufong thought for a moment and said. After that, Bufong took out the white tiger heaven stove, the charcoal oven, and flour, and began to make the fortune flatbreads. Many people in the surroundings were in a daze as they stared blankly at Bufong, watching him cook in full swing in front of the battlefield. They were somewhat speechless. Luoji and Yuji rolled their eyes. Did this fellow come all the way to the battlefield just to sell flatbreads? Sizzle! Hot steam rose into the sky. The oven was set up, and the flames were burning. One by one, the flatbreads were slapped onto the wall of the oven by Bufong. Bufong sat cross-legged on the ground, spread his divine will, and began the most important part of making flatbreads. Meanwhile, the battle on the battlefield had reached a white-hot stage. Because an hour had passed, the strength of the experts who had obtained the power from the fortune flatbreads had declined, so the nether prison experts had regained the upper hand. The earth prison experts kept retreating. Boom! Sword Demon Patriarch and the others looked at each other and saw the grave look in each other's eyes. Sure enough, that chef's flatbreads can lead this war, Sword Demon Patriarch said. Shadow Demon Patriarch and Nether Chef Patriarch narrowed their eyes, while Horned Demon Patriarch sneered. Then let's kill that little chef. If he is really that man's inheritor, it will be difficult to kill him if he hides in the shop. But since he dares to come to the battlefield, this is our chance to kill him. Horned Demon Patriarch grinned. Then he rushed out with large strides. Rumble. At this moment, the whole world seemed to shake. A huge three-horned rhinoceros emerged, its horn pointing at the sky as it charged toward the wall of imprisoned Dragon Pass. The tip of the horn was pointing at Bufong. The great sage of the Horned Demon clan was targeting Bufong. The faces of Luoji, Yuji, and the others turned very unsightly. They never thought that the 9 Revolution Great Sage would attack imprisoned Dragon Pass, regardless of his status. On the battlefield, when the Nether Prison experts saw this, their fighting spirit rose and they became excited. Their killing intent swept across the battlefield, forcing the Earth Prison army to retreat. Hades' era bellowed. Holding the Hades halberd, he made a move to stop Horned Demon Patriarch. Unfortunately, he felt like a moth flying into a flame. Horned Demon Patriarch was the 9 Revolution Great Sage, and his strength was too strong. Bufong sat cross-legged on the ground, his divine will enveloping the charcoal oven. Although he sensed Horned Demon Patriarch's attack, he remained as still as a mountain. You raised her wrist. Her aura began to fluctuate as she stood in front of Bufong. Suddenly, the void in front of you was torn apart. Crack! Crack! It was as if ice crystals were spreading out. A graceful figure slowly walked out of the void. It was a peerlessly beautiful figure. Her beauty was breathtaking, and as soon as she appeared, she became the focus of the whole scene. As soon as Ice Saint appeared, she gave you a complicated look. He sighed softly. Then, she raised her hand. The veil slid down, revealing her jade-like arm. She waved her arm and threw a palm in the direction of the horned beast ancestor. Boom! The palm fell, and ice crystals gathered in the sky. Horned Demon Patriarch immediately retreated, his eyes widening. The crazy woman of God, Vanishing Mountain, how dare you leave the Forbidden Land? Horned Demon Patriarch roared. Buzz, Sword Demon Patriarch, and the other 9 Revolution Great Sage appeared beside Horned Demon Patriarch. Hovering in the clouds, they watched the peerless woman from a distance. I didn't kill you last time, but you dare to show up again. This time, you will die. You don't need to go back to God Vanishing Mountain, Sword Demon Patriarch said coldly. Sword Demon Patriarch said coldly. Boom! Boom! In the sky, the auras of the 9 Revolution Great Sage Patriarchs erupted like a volcano that was about to erupt. Sword Demon, come and help me. Ah! Suddenly, a cry for help came from the battlefield of the stars. The Patriarchs, who were about to attack Ice Saint, changed their expressions. 2 against 1, and you still need help? When did Great Sage Acheron become so strong? The expressions of Sword Demon Patriarch and the others changed slightly. Buzz Bu Fong, who was sitting cross-legged in front of the oven, opened his eyes. He exhaled softly. The next moment, he reached out, took the flatbread out of the oven, and put it into the basket. "Thank you for your help. Here, I'll give you a flatbread." Bu Fong glanced at Ice Saint, the corners of his mouth twitching. He grabbed a steaming fortune flatbread and threw it to her. After catching it, Ice Saint gave Bu Fong a puzzled look. "Do you want to know what a flatbread is for? You'll know when you go up there and have a look," Bu Fong said, pointing mysteriously at the battlefield of the stars. Ice Saint narrowed her eyes. Then, her aura surged, and her graceful figure swayed as she soared into the sky. On the battlefield of the stars, Great Sage Acheron opened his mouth and spat out a fireball. The fireball's scorching heat twisted the void, startling both Fire Demon Patriarch and Beastmaster Patriarch in the distance. Great Sage Acheron could breathe fire? Was this the old fellow's new fighting skill? Great Sage Acheron sneered as he glanced at the frightened Fire Demon Patriarch and Beastmaster Patriarch. Then he took out the fortune flatbread given to him by Bu Fong, opened his mouth, and bit it with a crunch. It was a familiar feeling and a familiar crispness. The familiar fortune energy poured into his body. Great Sage Acheron put his palms together and placed them on his forehead, as if he was praying for luck. In the distance, Fire Demon Patriarch and Beastmaster Patriarch were a little stunned. Suddenly, Great Sage Acheron opened his eyes and burst out laughing. A terrible aura burst out of Great Sage Acheron, rippling in all directions. "I told you that my luck can't be so bad all the time, Acheron. Ha ha! You're a pig farmer, aren't you? Go to hell." Great Sage Acheron's eyes shone brightly. His aura kept climbing, as if he had broken through some shackles and rushed into a higher level. A strand of hair fell from Great Sage Acheron's head. Great Sage Acheron's pupils constricted. He wiped his hair over his head. All of a sudden, all his hair fluttered. "What's going on?" Great Sage Acheron froze. Why did he lose his hair? "I'm a 9-revolution Great Sage. How could I lose my hair? Is this the price I have to pay to become stronger?" Great Sage Acheron touched his cold, bald head, suddenly feeling a little sad. Is this good luck or bad luck? It's the same as obtaining the permanent fire-breathing skill. He really had the luck of making fools of people. Was thinking of the bald head's sadness, Great Sage Acheron's aura immediately locked on Fire Demon Patriarch and Beastmaster Patriarch. "I become stronger, but I'm also bald because of you. I'm bald. So, it's time for you to suffer my wrath." Boom! The battlefield of the stars suddenly exploded. A terrible power swept out. Hell overlording Long and the others were startled again. They looked straight into the distance, dumbfounded. A stream of light flew by. Fire Demon Patriarch didn't even have time to dodge, and he was punched. This punch almost scattered the fire on Fire Demon Patriarch's body. The power of this punch was so terrifying. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.